Welcome. This is Mark Reed, and welcome to the stream. Today, I'm interviewing PTown, who I met on Amy's stream, I think. We were just going to have a discussion. We had a really good discussion the other day. And so we're just going to have a discussion, interview, questions, and see where it all ends up. So,
Oh, you're so sweet.
Peter, welcome to the stream, mate. And do you want to give a sort of history of yourself or introduce yourself and let people know who you are?
Sure, Mark. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.
So I'm just a normal guy. I didn't grow up in a Christian home. Went to church with some friends, some neighbors here and there growing up, but I never really became a Christian officially. I averted away pretty hardcore. I would affirm myself as an atheist for a decent amount growing up, until I became about a senior in college, and now I'm a Christian. And I think that type of background is rather unique. I really enjoy talking about science and the things that led me astray. And I don't really get that from a lot of Christians, answering the tough questions or even talking about them. And that's, I guess, so far, partly my ministry is to atheists. And I enjoy talking to you, Mark. And I didn't see any streams coming up, so I just reached out to you and said, hey, you want to talk?
Yeah, sure.
And let me know, I just fixed my furnace. It's kind of exposed. Is it loud when it turns on like that? Can you guys hear that?
I can't say I noticed anything, but if there's any sound issues, I promise I will let you know, P-Town. That's not a problem, mate.
Thanks.
So your sort of household would you call it secular, or was it sort of culturally Christian but sort of not really practicing? How would you describe your sort of childhood home?
So I like to describe it as a dichotomy. My dad, for example, he even to this day, he loves science. He works for the United States government in a part of the government he can't tell me about. I still have no idea what he did. But I do remember him, I guess I'll give you an example. I would ask my mom, hey, what keeps the moon in the sky? Why is the moon in the sky? And she would just tell me, ask your dad when you get home, right? Or maybe she might say, I don't know, Pastor, God keeps it in the sky. And my dad would take the telescope, and he would talk about the constellations at a fairly young age. He would talk about how light travels and how far away they are, and of course, the type of person that I am, I'm going to lean towards my dad when it comes to anything, right? And that's how it started.
So would you call your mother deeply religious, or was she just sort of answering with God did it if she doesn't know the answer? Would you sort of say that she had deep belief?
My mom has schizophrenia, or it depends on which country you're in. It'll depend on what type of psychologist or psychiatrist and in which country to define what she has. But even currently now, she's struggling. She's hearing voices. She'll tell you.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That's rough. That's really rough.
She spent the majority of, a lot of my time growing up either on the couch or in the mental institution. Now, luckily, I grew up in England and they had free mental health care there.
Yeah.
So I've known a lot of people with mental illness. To answer your question, I think so. When it comes to religion, especially when she brings home people that'll tell you, hey, if you stare in the sun long enough, you'll see Jesus. My aversion towards the faith, and just there's a pretty strong push and pull dichotomy going on growing up.
Right. But you say you like talking about the science that led you astray. So what changed with sort of accepting your dad's scientific explanations to that's leading me away from what I'm not sure how you would phrase it, what you should know or ought to know, perhaps. Please do correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Well, there's a lot of examples you can give. I mean, I guess just like a lot of other kids growing up, you're fascinated with dinosaurs. I remember the specific smell on a bar of soap that was shaped like a dinosaur. And
Sure.
I think even until now, I mean, I still am trying to find that bar of soap. It had nothing to do with the soap. Just the whole concept of a dinosaur was just like, whoa, cool, you know.
Oh, I
puzzle.
still love dinosaurs. I still love
Right,
dinosaurs. You know,
right. And
I absolutely do.
you know, you're programmed from a very young age, the millions of years thing. You know, I loved watching those movies, and that's just one example. But when you're with your dad at a young age, he's taking a class in astronomy, and he's teaching you, of course, the constellations, which you can't actually remember all of them. But when you
Sure.
start to conceive of the idea of light travels, just the concept that light travels and that it's not instantaneous, and how far away things are based on that relationship.
Yeah, I think it's 300,000 kilometers a second is the speed of light, roughly is the speed of light.
So that knowledge growing up, you know, knowing that from a very young age, and then as you go through the church with your neighbors and they want to tell you something like Jesus made, you know, fed thousands of people with one loaf of bread, that you know, that the stars are. All right, see you, buddy.
Your beard looks terrible.
I know it is.
Hey, let my brother know his beard looks terrible, okay?
Hey,
I can't actually see his beard, so I can't, with all honesty, say that. But thank you for your input, PTown's brother. That's awesome.
Sorry about that.
No, not at all. It's all good, mate. It's fantastic. So obviously your brother has a problem with your beard, and that's cool. That's on the record.
It looks, for the record, it does look really, really bad.
That's okay. That's all right. No problem at all. Well, you sort of say programmed with millions of years. So what you're sort of suggesting is that science is sort of an indoctrination process. Seems to be, to me, what you're suggesting there, that we're sort of just giving children these false ideas. What is it about science that makes you think that it's just let's program these kids with these ideas? What is it about it that leads you to believe that?
Well, maybe I used the wrong words, and maybe I didn't, but I don't believe that, and it's partly because of Christians. It's their own fault. I don't think we get our fair take on science as Christians. There's plenty of Christians that have contributed to science throughout time, and now
absolutely.
there's this new thing going on. When I say new, it could be 100 years, it could be 150 years, it could be 50 years old. I don't know, but this separation between church and science, or religion and science, or Christianity and science, that's going on. You even yourself, just a second ago, said we affirming as if you are part of the science community, when honestly, and I don't mean to attack you, but I'm just trying to answer your question. I love science too.
Yeah,
I'm part of the we, but you ascribed the we to you. You, right? And you know, I don't know the word, but deferring that I'm not part of that. But I do love science, Martin.
No, the we included you as well. I sort of, when I'm using that term, I'm sort of including all of humanity. And you're right, maybe it's not an accurate depiction, but when I'm sort of saying we do this to find out how to reach the moon, I'm not saying, hey, it's just us that's reaching the moon. I'm saying, hey, it's humanity that's reaching the moon. It's all of us. We each contribute to our shared humanity in maybe small ways, but they're significant ways, you know. So when I'm using a term like that, I'm more talking about all of us, humans, basically. And
Sure.
maybe that is a sort of baggage from my own beliefs, because I'm a secular humanist. I think that humanity is the most important thing. So yeah, I'm sorry if it came across that way. I certainly didn't mean it that
No,
way.
and I don't think that your intentions are bad at all. And I'm just trying to explain it.
Yeah.
Because I agree with you that using we from a human perspective is okay. But when that human perspective that you're ascribing to be your view goes against mine, and you're tying that into it being scientific,
yes,
you follow me. And I don't mean any disrespect, but just trying to explain.
Okay, well, what's science to you? What does that word mean to you? How would you describe science?
And, we can define science in various different ways. If you want to define it as a word by itself, you can go back to what's the fancy word for the history of how words are made, but it would mean
Etymology.
knowledge. Yeah, it would just mean knowledge. Now,
Right.
we've changed the definition of science over time, and
Yep.
and now you'll see even new definitions, just like as words have changed in the dictionaries throughout time. It's
Sure.
changed completely to literally stating in some way, shape, or form that it has to be without God, and I have to take a stand against that, and that's partly why I'm on your call and having a discussion with you.
So, well, I mean, so in a way you're right, in a way you're wrong. We don't. So we basically redefine science as sort of, it used to be just scientia, which is Latin for knowledge, and that was hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Now it's sort of the process of how you find the knowledge, the process, a specific process that we use to come to conclusions about the world, basically. And that's sort of, I mean, you have to go into the whole history of the scientific method, which is methodological naturalism. Have you heard methodological naturalism before?
You're welcome to define it if you'd like.
Oh,
I'm not
okay.
familiar with it.
Yeah, so you have sort of a philosophical or ontological naturalism, which basically I don't subscribe to necessarily. It basically says God can't exist. We're excluding God from any kind of thought. It can't exist. We're only going to believe in the natural. Now, that isn't science. Science is methodological naturalism. What that translates to is that you cannot use God or supernatural things as evidence in science. Like, so you can't start with the idea of God, and you can't use supernatural things to demonstrate that the supernatural exists. But if it leads to there, that's fine, right? That's the difference between the two. That science isn't necessarily prohibited from arriving at a conclusion of a God or anything supernatural for that matter. But it is prohibited in using the supernatural to arrive at that conclusion. And the reason behind that is because we can't seem to find the supernatural. Like we can't seem to put it in the scientific method. So,
well, is it okay if I cut you off just before I forget?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So you said God or supernatural.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, just supernatural. God falls in there somewhere.
Right. And I think it's this grouping, because when you say supernatural, to the minds of most of your listeners, I don't know how many people are watching or will watch, but to their mind, it's not natural, right? And I think that is a bias in and of itself, because I believe in God. I believe he created nature, and I believe in that sense he is natural. And here's my point. When there is a revelation from God, would you consider the Bible supernatural? I'm assuming you would say no, but when it does point to something in advance, then it happens. There's no scientific textbook that will point to that. Why? Because the new scientific method states that that's supernatural. Well, it doesn't matter to me what term you ascribe it with. It still is what it is. God said it first.
Okay, so what can you give me an example of something you'd say points to the supernatural? Can you give me an example of that?
Well, if it's okay if I first redefine and not, I don't want to ascribe God to being supernatural. God is natural
Okay,
because he's God. He made everything, including
okay.
nature. But if you want me to give you an example of what the Bible has said before scientists have recently discovered, and now I think, a small glass of wine in, maybe a big, depending on who you are. But you have to look at the specifics within Scripture. The fact that
Why?
light travels, that light can be parted, the balance between air and how light contributes to how the weight of air, and how air and the weight of it contributes to wind, how water forms together and contributes to ice, which forms in the air, which can contribute to rain or snow. Um, there's lots of science in the Bible that we've only come to recent. The fact that there's mountains under the sea, that there's springs in the sea. There's a whole lot of science in the Bible, lots of medical examples too. I mean,
So
it's you can
if
go
you're
on.
using, well, sorry to interrupt you, but if you're using science as in knowledge equals knowledge, then perhaps, yeah, you've got a point. But if you're using science in the modern sense, which is the process which is used to arrive at conclusions about reality, then no, there isn't science in the Bible, because it's a very specific process that begins with observation, then questioning, then experimentation, well, hypothesis, then experimentation with a focus on falsifiability, then conclusion, peer review, and retesting is in there if you find your conclusions to be falsified. That's sort of the modern process of science. So if somebody says, hey, there's no science in the Bible, they're not saying that there's no knowledge in the Bible, or there's no, and what you seem to be doing is describing observations, which is the first part of science. Don't get me wrong, it is a necessary part. You have to observe something happening, or observe the world around you. But what they're saying is this process of testing and falsification isn't actually in the Bible, and that's what they're referring to.
Maybe I missed something, Mark, but in a small way, I feel like you made my point. I just
Really?
briefly mentioned quite a few things that the Bible said first before relatively modern scientists discovered, things that we've attributed to be very fancy and wonderful.
Well,
And your objection to it was that, oh, well, that's not part of the process
right,
that we've defined as science. And do you
right.
see, like, that's what I mean by you have hijacked the word science by
What do you
changing
mean
the
by
definition of it.
hijacked?
If you could take a book, right, a
I didn't
scientific
change the
book.
definition of it. I didn't change the definition of it. It just, like you said, it changes over time. That's etymology. Words change over time. Nobody hijacked the meaning of the word science. It just changed over time to reflect the current processes that we use to perform it. And that took hundreds of years. That went through the Enlightenment, where basically they said, hey, we're getting nowhere with assuming God as the conclusion. We have to throw it out. And it was a bunch of atheists, and actually more deists, that did that, people that believed in God but wouldn't ascribe to him doing anything in the world. So I didn't change that. That's just what it is in a modern sense.
Well, maybe I can explain better by saying what I mentioned doesn't go against your process, your scientific method. If you give God credit to the Bible, if you say, what he has said before we discovered it, and you just categorized it as a theory. If you took the Bible as a theory and what it says, and then tested it, I think that you would come to see the truth.
Well, the problem is that you've sort of said, okay, they knew these things before science knew them, kind of thing, or before the rest of humanity knew them. And I've got a couple of points on that. I've kind of heard that from every religion, especially Islam. People, arguing for Islam make that claim rather definitively. Usually, it has to be so. So the question is, how did they know this? Was it in sort of your interpretation of the Bible that is coming out? The amount of people that I've sort of said say that the heavens were they knew it was space when it clearly says that there was water in the firmament of the heavens. All of these springs underwater kind of thing. It's a bit of a very, very generous interpretation to get to the Bible's description of what they're saying. Did they know it by coincidence? Did they have some other way to discover this? Was it in some way some other explanation that may be supernatural? Did they have magic? Did they get visited by aliens and they showed them the springs underwater? The problem here, PTown, is that you've got one hypothesis and you're not sort of trying to falsify it. You're trying to confirm it. You're trying to say, okay, what are all the things that confirm my hypothesis? And that's why the scientific process has such a problem with this approach. It's because, and I would actually consider myself a scientist. Network engineering is my field. We use the scientific process every day. Especially, I mean, if you look at, have you ever done any troubleshooting?
I don't know what troubleshooting is, but
okay. So my apologies. Yeah, no, probably people in the audience don't know.
But you've brought up a lot of things, though, Mark.
Yeah, sorry. No, go ahead. Yeah, no worries.
I'm just a man. I think we're in agreement in some way, shape, or form. It's just our overall viewpoint when it comes to the Enlightenment. Your view, and just as mine was, that it was, religious people that got in the way of perpetuating or just pursuing more knowledge. And then you said, and then I've come to believe that it was actually kind of a combination of both. People who were religious, and I think it was the scientific religious community that was holding people back during that time. So it's kind of a mesh of beliefs.
Holding people back. What do you mean by that? Holding them back? The Enlightenment's generally considered by everybody to be one of the greatest steps forward in humankind. What were they held back?
Well, you know how a lot of the young Earth creationist videos out there, hey sweetie, they'll talk about how science is a religion now.
Yeah, I don't think that's accurate at all.
Right, I agree. I agree that you believe that. But I think if you look at the past, it goes back to your other point, where when you conduct studies, or you were giving me as an example, I was just looking at the Bible, and I was just maybe possibly trying to find something that would affirm to my beliefs. And I think you could partly agree with me that the same thing kind of happens in science.
I don't agree, actually.
Okay.
So let me point out. Yeah. So let me point out what troubleshooting is, and you've possibly done this without even knowing. It's a methodology where you try and find something wrong with your computer or your systems or your networks, kind of thing. What you'll do is you'll try to gather as much information as possible. Posit what you think the problem is, and then try to disprove it. Right? You'll go, okay, could it be the internal circuit, the motherboard or something? You put another motherboard in. If it's still happening, it's not the motherboard, right? You've falsified it. You're trying to prove it wrong. So you can move on to something else and go, okay, let's try this thing. And then, if it's not the graphics card, you're like, oh, well, it's not the graphics card. Look, what else could it be? You're using the information you're gathering from falsifiability from falsifying your initial hypothesis to move on and test something else. So, you might work out it's the hard disk from doing all that. How do you do that? You put it in, it works. You've failed to falsify it. You instead have confirmed it through trying to falsify it. And that's much like the process of science. In a professional sense, that network engineering.
Let me just go out there and say,
sure.
You're just, in a way, trying to perpetuate the falsification of the truth, which is God made this world.
How do you know that's the truth?
So you've already, just through the process, just tried to destroy God by saying, because you can't falsify a fact, correct?
Well, that's
Can you
true,
falsify a fact, right?
But you can't falsify.
Can you agree then?
No, hold on. Let me finish, PTown. You can't falsify something that's been made up either.
Can you falsify a fact?
Can you falsify a fact? Well, is something that is ontologically true. You can mistakenly falsify it, but you can't, in actuality falsify it.
So can you falsify a fact?
You've just repeated the question. I answered it.
And your answer is you can't.
You can't. Right? No.
Okay.
No.
Right.
But also,
if God was a fact,
yeah, but
can you falsify? Look, just let me finish my point, Mark. Okay. Just answer. Okay, just entertain me for a minute. You agree that you can't falsify a fact, correct?
Right. Yep.
Okay. If God was a fact, can you falsify him?
No.
And so far, you've described science as being the move forward is falsifying things, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So we're back to why we're having these discussions, because your definition of science won't work when it comes to discovering what I believe to know to be the truth.
Right.
Right. So we're in agreement there.
Yeah. So the whole point is you can't falsify a fact. If God is a fact, then it's unfalsifiable. But if God is also an unfalsifiable claim, then it's unfalsifiable. I'll take the analogy of Russell's teapot, that if I claim there's a teapot around Jupiter and it's too small to be seen or detected in any way, you cannot falsify that. You have no power to. That does not mean it is indeed a fact. You would have to check it out and see. The problem comes, and this is why
Mark, because sometimes you're a lot smarter than me in some ways, because I don't do this that much.
I don't.
But especially when I'm on an empty stomach.
Not drinking on. Don't drink on an empty stomach. That's always a disaster.
My wife just brought me a plate of food, but it's apparently hard to eat when you're talking.
Thank you, Mrs. PTown. Take care of our guest. Thank you.
And I'm not a very big philosophical person here, but I mean, I am by nature, but I also, my philosophy is kind of against getting too philosophical, kind of a double thing.
Okay.
So back to your point, if I can keep my mind straight, and this is why I cut you off, because sometimes, ADD kicks in.
Okay.
The fact that you're...
Yeah. Do you want me to recap the last thing that I said?
Recap for me, and I'll
okay. So things that are sort of in actually facts that are actually true are unfalsifiable, but so are things that are not facts that just are unfalsifiable. Right.
Okay, I remember my point. Kind of. Okay. But could we agree after my last little, if you want to get religious and call it dissertation, can we agree that according to my belief that your definition of science won't get there? Even though I agree that your definition of science can't unfalsify God?
Correct, but there's a lot of things that my definition of science can't falsify, and to sort of pull it into sort of a reductio ad absurdum, it can't falsify magic. It can't falsify aliens. It can't
But
falsify.
if the
There's a million
Bible
things.
says something before we discovered it, would you consider
Right.
that magic? Or is it worth mentioning?
I don't know how they just, knew that. That's the whole point. The whole
Did they
point
just get
of
lucky?
perhaps they have described something that they believed on faith that just coincidentally happened to be true. That does occur.
But how many of those instances do you need before you can go, this makes sense?
Here's the problem, PTown. A lot of them are just very loose and vague. They're not like saying, "Hey, here's a thing, and its rate of expulsion is this much," and it doesn't do that. It doesn't get specific, and a lot of the language is very very poetic or very sort of descriptively
Correct. I agree with you.
Yeah,
it's not easy.
And the translations from ages ago aren't that accurate either. So, or not, we try to be accurate as possible, of course, but
this is why I was careful with my words earlier. I try to be careful with them. I fail, but when I was saying it's you, Mark, if you went and looked at and studied the Bible like a scientist with that same process, I think you would come closer to understanding the truth. Not science in general, but
I have read the Bible. And I've studied passages from the Bible. I doing a Bible study, a skeptical Bible study, along with some people online on Amy's channel.
But we know what that's about. I love Amy and those guys, but you can agree with me. It's not the same as if you and I were going verse by verse. And
some of the things in there are very unscientific and wrong. Like, for instance, the mustard seed being the smallest of seeds, and it isn't. It wasn't even the smallest in the area. There's a lot of things smaller than that. There seems to be some so when science and the Bible clash.
Well, when I get it, but usually even when I go into something as insubstantial as that, usually it reveals something, and I think we could agree that the whole point of his parable was that you and I, once you become a Christian, even though we're like mustard seeds, it can grow.
Yeah, I don't doubt that some of the language should be taken hyperbolically and sort of metaphorically. I don't doubt that. The problem that I have is that things that you see as scientific facts in there, you take literally and not metaphorically. You take them really literally. But other things which are scientifically inaccurate, you sort of say, well, that's metaphorical, that's hyperbole. He was just, sort of trying to make an analogy to things.
Not necessarily me. There are. But I would agree with you to your point. For example, if you look at a woman cut out your eye, I don't, or whatever, right? You would agree that Jesus isn't telling you to cut out your own eye, right?
I honestly, I don't think so. I don't.
But if you were to make an argument, you could. And the point is, it's like, if you're looking at it from that perspective, but once you change sides, you start to see how beautiful and how much truth it really reveals.
Why should what side you're on affect the outcome of your process? Because there's all kinds of Christians involved in the scientific process, and they do amazing work. Francis Collins springs to mind, who basically mapped the human genome. He's an amazing man. I have great respect for him. And he's a very devout Christian. So I don't understand why your side should affect the outcome of your inquiry.
Well, I didn't mean approaching it necessarily like that. There's different levels of skepticism. I still am very skeptical when I study the Bible. But I don't know why God made it that way. If you go and you approach the Bible just trying to point out every possible flaw just because that's what you want to do, to build a channel or to have fun or whatever it is, it's not going to impact you the same way as genuinely approaching it with the right intentions. I don't know why God made it that way. Don't know.
Well, it sounds like that if you believe it to be true beforehand, you'll find it more convincing.
And in a way though, because even though, so like one thing I realize is, as a Christian now and a former atheist, I didn't change who I am or my process, right? I didn't change. And that was really relieving for me, because I understand where you're coming from, Mark, because I mean, I think I mentioned it before. Senior in high school, I didn't even have to train to be in debate, trained to do an oratory speech, because it came natural to me, and I just gave a speech against religion. That was just easy for me. I mean, that came from the heart. So now, even though I'm a glass and a half in, it's still from the heart.
Was it a gradual thing, this change? Was it gradual, or was there something that you went, oh yes, that's definitely the truth? What was the catalyst for that change?
Sure. It was definitely, it's hard for me to pinpoint exactly, but of course, just telling the world on the internet, trying to reminisce, is not going to be the best thing, but I'll do it anyway.
Okay. Well, it's up to you. You don't have to.
It's okay. Maybe it was me getting on my knees and just praying to God. Hey, if you're real, I need you now. I want to find a girl. Or I'm not happy, and I need your. Can you help me now? And then it takes time, and then things happen, and I can't say good things happen, but even then, that's not enough, right? For my skeptical mind. I mean, it's never anything that's enough until it gets to a point where over a period of time, and I'm not saying it's just that, good things happening to you. It's not like that. But asking God to fulfill, the gaps and in the Word too, that was huge, and that took a lot of time. And going through all of those things, if you could, and you could probably relate. Imagine if you were in my shoes now. Imagine how many things God has to overcome, get you there. To say it in just a few words, if you became a Christian, and I know you think it's impossible, but if you did, imagine how many things you would have to talk about.
Well, I think that it would require. Right? I don't see me becoming a Christian as so unlikely. I just would require reasonable, reliable, rigorous evidence. That's all I would require. But unfortunately, that's never presented to me.
So imagine you were in my shoes, and that rigorous evidence was fulfilled. That would be a lot to talk. It would be just a lot to talk about, because you can go from, if you just want to talk about the scientific realm, you have the Big Bang all the way to evolution, or the atrocities throughout history. You can get into the philosophical realm. You can get into the political realm. You can go into all kinds of things. The whole, you can go into. It would be a long, for me, kind of like this hypothetical it was definitely a long marathon. It was not like I just went to the stage and said, Jesus save me, and then poof. I think that image of how it works is just a burden upon.
Yeah, you kind of said you got on your knees, prayed, good things happened over an extended period of time. What would make you think that that's reliable, repeatable, and rigorous evidence for a God?
So, it's hard for me to call it evidence.
There's plenty of people that do that, right? And they don't get that experience. They get really bad things happening to them over time. It doesn't seem to matter about that to them in their experience. And you sort of brought up the argument from morality, like all the bad things happening. Why would you think that that's, reliable and robust evidence for a God rather than it's
Well, you asked me how it started, not necessarily
right,
what brought me all the way. I think that
right,
it's not in and of itself. And when it comes to evidence in the Bible,
right.
like I just mentioned a bunch of, I tried to mention a few without having notes or anything, but it's mentioned a bunch of things that were foretold in Scripture that were sciencey. I know that the chat's going to love that word, sciencey. But I
The chat
mean,
loves all kinds of things that are weird. That's fun.
my
Chat's
point
fun.
is it for me, because I'm a peculiar type of person who demands evidence. I think there's a special place in heaven for a guy like me, because it was not it it is a long battle, and it still is. I mean, think about how many Christians who could talk to atheists for the last 3 weeks I've been calling in, and
I
still
don't know.
I haven't been persuaded any which way. But I'll tell you, it's not the same case for most Christians, because they're not rooted like I am. There hasn't been a new thing. I mean, sometimes there's a new thing here that I don't have an answer for, but I'm not afraid to go investigate it, because so far every time I do, God holds supreme always.
But if God holds supreme, what could convince you otherwise? What could I possibly present that would convince you that you're wrong?
Well, I think that there's nothing that I could possibly present to you that would make you feel wrong either. Which is okay. I think that
no, PTown, I'll just interrupt. Sorry, mate, but I said reliable, robust, rigorous evidence. I made that perfectly clear. The fact that, and I agree that the things you've presented aren't really evidence, or not good evidence. I did point that out, what I would require, but it seems to me, and I may be wrong, but it seems to me there is nothing that I could ever present to you that would ever change your mind, because you are so set on this God idea that you are unwilling to change.
No, of course not.
Okay. Then what would convince you that you're wrong?
Sorry, you got me reminiscing about all the things throughout time that have persuaded me to be who I am now.
Okay, that's all right. No
what I was trying to say is, I think that in the same way, there's nothing that I could say or do that would persuade you to automatically become a Christian. The whole point of us talking is that it's planting seeds, and that your audience is just planting seeds. I know there's not going to be anything instant that's going to happen. Why God made it that way, I don't know. But if I was to break it down, it's the number. There's no one thing in the Bible that just proves itself. There is the number of things, the patterns, the little tiny proofs. It's the number of them. You can say, oh, that was an accident. Oh, he got lucky there. Oh, the Bible doesn't mean that. Look at all these other people that disagree. You could keep doing that, but eventually you get to a point where you're like, okay, let me just shut up and listen for a minute. And you're like, oh, now I get it. Now it's not about just the brush strokes. It's about the painting. This is more than Picasso. This is a 3D Picasso. This is the most beautiful thing in the world.
Look,
that's the truth.
It could be an absolutely gorgeous thing in the world. I get that, but that doesn't make it true. The whole point that I'm trying to get at is trying to find what your methodology is for arriving at the conclusions of knowledge that you have. Is your methodology reliable, or is it something that you've arrived at without sort of a proper foundation of
so
going,
let me put I'll put my, if it's okay, I don't mean to cut you off, but because I genuinely want to put myself back in time here. So there was a period in time where I started to become Christian. And quite frankly, I'm a little embarrassed to admit this. I still didn't believe in the Bible, but I hadn't read it. I hadn't studied it, especially. I didn't even know there were different versions yet. I bet you most of your some of your audience might not even know
So
that.
what convinced you to become a Christian if you didn't read the Bible?
Honestly, maybe it was a leap of faith, but at the same time, it was still because I demand evidence, right? I demand like concrete evidence, whether it's small or big, as long as it's concrete. Okay.
But you did make that leap of faith
I didn't.
first from...
No, I did. I
Okay.
made a leap of faith first, in a sense, and partly it's due to
Yeah.
my wife. It's not like I did not become she'll Mrs. PTown would attest to it. Trust me, I did not take that leap of faith.
Sorry,
It was
I
definitely
missed what you said.
challenging. Yeah.
Due to your wife. What do you mean by that?
Well, when she was able to start to answer some of my questions, and usually when you're dating, a lot of the questions stem, when it comes to sociological or political reasons or just basic objections towards the Bible. It doesn't get too deep, but someone who's actually able to have a cordial conversation with you and answer those
Yeah.
questions, that's the beginning of it. But to the man of me, to the world that I grew up in, that is so far from factual evidence that I demand. It took
Right.
a lot of time for that.
Right. So I wanna go back to something that you said. So when you were talking about when you first started praying, you said you were getting on your knees praying to God to find a girl, and then you're sort of saying, "Hey, I made a leap of faith, but it wasn't due to my wife, or it wasn't there." I see a parallel there. I see a series of events happening that you were skeptical. You appealed to a deity to find a girl. It sounds like an awesome girl came along. She sounds really cool. If she can have like these conversations with you and really stimulate you intellectually, it's really important in a relationship. And you sort of took a leap of faith, but is that the most reliable way to come to a conclusion about reality? I would say no.
No, I agree with you. I mean, but you asked me from when it started, and that's really hard to pinpoint because it's this long process for me. I'm not like most people. I can point to times on the golf course, that experience. And then when it comes to the most, catastrophic time in my life in college, then the most catastrophic time in my life shortly after when I was in my professional career. And I can point, these are all things that I would say, God came in and just kind of nudged me along the way. And when I look back and reminisce, I go, he was kind of there. He never left me. Why he took so long, I don't know. Why he did that? Maybe it's so I can be on your silly show. I don't mean to say silly. In general,
hey, we both agree it's a silly show. No, I don't. We're in total agreement there.
Why God did this to me, I don't know. Right?
Why anyone is watching is beyond me.
But you and I do share, the opinion that this is important to talk about, and I appreciate you, Mark.
Yeah,
I do.
absolutely. I do appreciate you, PTown, but what I'm sort of seeing is a lot of, well, I came to the conclusion. I took a leap of faith and came to the conclusion first, and then obviously you look back and go, "Oh, God nudged me along the way." I guess
it's not
what
good
I'm
enough,
trying to...
right? Let me finish then. So I'll get to the nitty gritty for you. It probably was Kent Hovind, which I know everyone's gonna lose their marbles over this, but he did. He exposed me to the thought, like, you know what? Maybe there is another explanation. Okay, it was just like, even now, I love Kent Hovind. I've talked to him on the phone once. He's, I do appreciate what he does. His role is just you'll be surprised how many people out there have no idea, because the way that quote unquote science has pushed through our community, especially since we made it law that they have to teach it in school, and I was one of them. It's the idea that there's another explanation, a possibility, even as ridiculous as you think it is, just the idea that there is opposition is something that people aren't exposed to, and I wasn't. And that was and that's just the beginning. But
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
I don't eliminate all possibility of a God. I don't think I can honestly do that. But I don't believe that a God exists. I'm what's called a hard atheist. I think that God is a terrible explanation for just about anything. But let's get on to Hovind. So the fact that there is another explanation doesn't necessarily make it true. Like magic, for instance, I can't dismiss the possibility there might be wizards running around, but them as an explanation for anything is really, really bad explanation. Same with fairies, same with aliens, same with all of these things. There's what we're looking for is a reliable methodology to arrive at the truth, and science seems to provide that. Now, you could possibly opt out of science classes or ignore them if they are mandatory curriculum over in the US, but there's a reason why these institutions and businesses love a science background. It's because it works. It produces knowledge for us. And in a very, very reliable way and demonstrable way. So you can.
Well,
you
I
can
think I would disagree, and I think that so far the real devout Christians who have questioned things and researched things for themselves against the opposition of your so-called science, I would put them way above most of the others that I've met.
So
because their ability to go to the other level. Now, and that this is going to another. No, I probably shouldn't have said that, but I just don't. There's some opposition to what you're mentioning. I think that it's not quite fair and I was surprised to see it too.
Oh, I think it is fair. The scientific method has been responsible for almost every discovery. That the fact that we are here talking right now is due to science. It wasn't prayer.
Because this is where.
Mate, let me finish. Okay. It wasn't prayer or some other thing that happened that allowed us to develop the internet. It was scientific process. It was a process of hypothesis, falsification. And I know this directly because it was the American government that set it up. Originally, it was called ARPANET, and it was a defense contract to allow computers to keep running in a network if there was ever nuclear bombs falling. And the scientific process that they used to develop that is the same as the scientific process for almost everything, every piece of technology that we use today. Sorry, go ahead, PTown. I just want to make that clear.
Sorry, I'm trying to eat a little bit as we go. And I was still listening to you.
Yeah, I just...
No, I agree with you, but I think that, well, at the same time, maybe it's relevant. If you want to have a debate about how there's a lot of Christian scientists that have contributed to a lot of things.
Yes.
Right? I mean, you picked one random thing about the internet, but I don't know who invented the internet for sure. I don't know if he was a Christian or not, or if it was a she. But there's a lot of scientists out there that were Christian. I mean, the men that walked on the moon, I believe, were Christian. Sure. I'm assuming Thomas Edison was a Christian. Newton spent most of his time in the scriptures. In fact, I think it led to a lot of his discoveries from the scriptures. That's another discussion. So to ascribe, it goes back to our original point.
Yeah.
The original thing was you're trying to hijack the definition of science to your court. And I don't think history would say that, buddy.
No, it's the opposite way round. So the whole point about methodological naturalism is that you can have any belief that you want. It just can't enter the science. So when Newton did his theorems, when these people walked on the moon, they didn't basically say, oh, well, we're going to posit a God and then that's going to get us to the moon. It was all naturalistic things, one after another. And that's the whole point of science. There is nothing stopping anybody of any religion or any belief from participating in science. A flat earther can participate in science. Somebody that believes that magic is out in the universe can participate in science. But the actual process of science doesn't include those beliefs. It just doesn't. In fact, it's designed to stop those beliefs from influencing the outcomes of the experimentation and falsifiability. That's what it's designed.
Well, hold on. I mean, I'm pretty sure that a minute ago, you were stating something different. But let me just say that
What do you mean?
as a Bible believing Christian, let's give Newton as an example. Would you agree? Do you know, or have you studied the history of Newton?
Oh, yes. I also know
Okay.
that Newton was an alchemist. He believed that he could turn lead into gold, and actually had a huge amount of mercury in his system after he died because of this erroneous belief that alchemy could somehow make him rich.
Okay, so, but we would agree that Newton was pretty smart, right?
Sure, absolutely. He was a genius.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would we agree that he's a Christian? He loved the
Yeah.
scriptures? Yeah.
Sure. I don't see what this has got to do with
I believe
anything.
that scripture probably helped him along the way when it comes to a lot of his knowledge, because that's what there's a lot of things in the Bible that it just seems pretty amazing, and you'd have to see it for yourself, man.
Okay.
The impact that it has on your life.
All right, PTown, let's
Mhm.
flip the script a little bit, because I don't think his faith had anything to do with the achievements that he made. I think he's welcome to them, but none of that was like, he didn't bring that religion into his maths. You would agree with that, right?
I'm not sure about that. I don't know.
Okay. Well, maybe you should look up whether Newton's faith actually was part of his mathematical theorems. But I'll
I'm
flip
not
the
gonna. It
script
wouldn't
and
be something I would Google. That's for sure.
why not? Why wouldn't you try and find that out?
I wouldn't just Google it. I mean, it's pretty tough
Oh,
considering the language that he spoke at the time and how he.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I can say
But let's not get
that
too off topic.
no,
Yeah.
pretend. Let me finish. That Newton proved his theorems mathematically, not theologically. You would agree that Einstein was a very smart man?
I think so. Yeah.
And he was an atheist.
I don't know for sure.
He
And
was
here's
an
why. I mean,
atheist.
okay, so you have his general relative, or what is it called?
General theory of relativity, yeah.
General theory of relativity. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's a special
Didn't he
theory
have
of
to go?
relativity.
He had to go find a spot to look at a solar eclipse. And this goes back to our original topic last time that got us going. It just baffles me that he could go and he has to go find the right spot in the world so he can see if a star moves while there's an eclipse going on, right? To confirm his theory, to see that a star moves. Would we agree that
Yes.
that's the basis of?
Yeah, I believe he
Okay,
was looking at
proof.
the transit of
Right.
Venus. Yeah, but
Right.
basically it
But
was
how
just
did he?
well, it was observation of natural phenomenon. He'd already done the math first, right? He'd already done the process and said, "Hey,
Correct.
this is my hypothesis.
My
If it's
point
false,
is,
then I
I do.
shouldn't see this happen." And he did, which sort of, that's the whole process of
But even
falsification.
though he approached science the way that you like it so much, from an
Oh,
atheistic
of
perspective, I
course.
do think you would find mentions here and there, some quotes of him about he can't deny that God made that he made the sun and the moon the same size from our perspective. And God talks about it in a book where it will reveal knowledge to him.
Yeah, so
I think it says it in there.
Einstein never said that God made it that way or anything of the sort. He believed in the God of Spinoza, who was a philosopher that believed that he basically said God was the natural laws of physics. And he was an atheist that just attributed this label to take some of the spirituality out of it. So the sort of all just the natural processes of the universe was God to him. And it was just more metaphorical than anything else. So he didn't attribute any of the natural workings to any kind of God of the Bible or any kind of God being. It was just his God was the laws of the universe.
You know, we can you can ascribe to that, but I'm pretty sure that I've seen some quotes of his where I think that even though he approached science from your perspective, the way a scientist should, I think it was screaming in his ears. I think he knew that
How can you tell?
God existed.
How can
Well,
you tell?
he would make a thing, and I think it comes down to this, where we would agree that it's a great phenomenon that the sun and the moon appear the same size from our perspective. I hope we agree on that. I don't want to go down that channel. Can we agree on that?
Yeah, it's sort of
It's a thing,
the
right? At least.
it's the natural. It's a case of natural things happening and producing these things. There's no there's nothing supernatural we can find about the moon being the same size as
Sure,
the
but
sun in a solar eclipse. There's
Eisenhower did
nothing.
say, Einstein did say, God doesn't play dice.
Yeah, so he's talking about, as I said, the physics of the universe, the natural laws of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember
Which
me
might
saying
include
that?
the moon and the sun.
Well, it's Spinoza's God, which is sort of natural sort of physics and the way they work. He's basically saying nothing is truly random. And he was talking specifically about quantum mechanics, how there's a lot of random chance involved in that. And he was sort of, he didn't like quantum mechanics. Einstein sort of said, don't like it. I don't think God plays dice with the universe. It was a metaphorical reference to Spinoza, the god of Spinoza, which was just mere physical laws. He wasn't appealing to any kind of deity.
Well, I disagree with you.
Yeah, well, I'm really sorry, PTown, but you're just wrong then. I'm really sorry, mate. And
yeah,
plus,
I think if he went to enough solar eclipses where he would look and he would see, God clearly made that.
Well, the problem now, PTown, is you're sort of co-opting the thoughts of a dead person to support your own beliefs, and I think that's a problem. You're sort of saying, hey, this is what he really believed, even
Well,
though
you're doing the
sort of
same thing,
statements.
Mark. You're doing the same thing.
Well, there's
To say that
statements
you're
to the
right and I'm wrong is
contrary.
still.
Well, I don't. Well, I don't think what somebody thought in the past really has a bearing on what's true or not. I don't think that this sort of came up because you
Well,
sort of
let's
said,
talk about what you believe.
well, let me
You.
finish. Let me finish. Well, you brought this up because you said Newton believed in a god, which I said, yeah, he did. He also believed in alchemy, which is clearly wrong. Just because someone is smart doesn't mean they are right. That's the problem. Now, what I believe, I mean, to give you my background, I grew up in a secular household. We were Protestant by name, but never practiced, never baptized, never even knew what religion was until I was probably a teenager. So I have never believed in a God, have never been indoctrinated to any kind of religion. Grew up with science, grew up with actually that's not entirely kind of true. My mother was into things like astrology and what do you call it, essential oils kind of thing, what am I thinking of, naturopathy maybe. Now the thing that really the thing that really solidified, because I did believe in that stuff for quite a while, sort of, that astrology could determine how somebody behaved and give you insights into how the future would go. Nothing like, oh, it was concrete, but, I thought it gave you insights. Now, the thing that sort of broke my belief in that was that my mother was always tired and always very, very tired and always, fatigued and could barely stand some days. She tried crystals and astrology, and at one point she tried Chinese medicine. I'll never forget the drinks that she was having, that she crushed up these scorpions and put it in the Chinese medicine kind of
so
thing.
We have a similar background in some
Sure,
way,
yeah,
with our
perhaps,
moms.
yeah. So that kind of belief that would help continued on for years, seeing her try all these different things. She believed in the Chinese medicine. She thought it would help her, and it was helping her at some stages, but it was really her belief overcoming what was actually happening. So a friend of ours who was very knowledgeable and So eventually she got into Mensa, right? Which is the worldwide sort of thing for geniuses, because she was a literal genius. Someone in there sort of said, no, go see this person. They're a doctor. They specialize in cardio and this. And she went to this guy. She had celiac disease, right? It just took a lot of falsification of stuff to find out that she had celiac. Now, if you're unfamiliar with celiac disease, it's an allergy to gluten. What happens is that you have gluten, like the gluten in bread. The cilia in your stomach lies down and gets, because you're allergic to it, it basically stops functioning. And then you fail to absorb nutrients, like all of the nutrients that you need to, I don't know, give you energy, for instance. Now, that sort of broke the spell that I was under, the belief that these things, there was supernatural and these mystical things out there, because she had gone, probably would have been 5-6 years trying everything under the sun that was, all of these definitely cure, if you just believe and do these spiritual things and meditate and all of this stuff. It was bullshit. It was complete horse hockey. She stopped eating gluten, like just basically went to non-gluten bread, and she couldn't have Mars bars anymore because it has a thickener, gluten in it. Cut out gluten, and she was 100% better. The whole point, and the point that I want to get at, is that there are different ways at arriving at what is true. You can believe in something and you can feel like it is true and feel like it's working, but at the end of the day, it's ground up scorpions in a cup. It's not actually working, even though you can 100% believe it is. And I saw her believe it was working when it wasn't. It just wasn't. And that for me just showed that you need more reliable, robust, and repeatable evidence than just a few things have happened and I feel like it. And so, growing up, I've passed there. I've always been I want my information to be as reliable as possible. Right. So I also remember getting convinced, even as I was a bit older than that, getting convinced that sort of aliens built the pyramids. I bought into the, I don't know if you've heard of him, he's called Eric von Daniken. He wrote Chariots of the Gods, which was a book about, all of the gods were aliens kind of thing.
When did you start reading that?
Probably about 15, 16 or so. I believed that.
So was that while you were a Christian, or?
I was never a Christian.
Okay.
I was never. Well, I say I was never a theist. I think at about maybe 18, 19, I was like a pantheist for a couple of months kind of thing. I thought that God was everything in the universe, that the universe was God. But I came to the conclusion that the universe is the universe, and if I'm just calling it God, then why? Because it's just the universe. Like it doesn't, it doesn't add anything more. And at about that time, I sort of started to see Hitchens, see people like Matt Delahunty, people that approach these things with very logical and analytical minds. And
you found them all online, right? Not through a book. I'm just wanting to get a better background.
I mean, Dawkins I read first before ever seeing him online. Okay. His books were amazing. Sort of the explanations as to the way that language propagates and the way that ideas evolve over time is fascinating. Did you know he made up the word meme? Did you know that? That's incredible.
Dawkins?
Richard Dawkins made up the word meme. It was how ideas evolve into something else over time, and that's exactly what memes do. And it wasn't his original idea of a meme, what we call it today. It's evolved over time, which shows that his analysis was actually correct. It's fascinating. But so I read a lot of his books, Blind Watchmaker, stuff like that. And sort of started seeing Delahunty and Hitchens online, and their approach made a lot of sense to me. That it's easy to go to somebody, get crushed up scorpions, and think it's going to cure everything. It's hard. It's harder to actually go out there, empirically test things and falsify things and do the hard work that science requires to come to a answer, while not a cure-all, is actually the right answer. And it's hard. Like my mum going through giving up gluten. You can't eat bread. You can't eat, like I was saying, Mars bars, they've got a thickener with gluten in it. She had to look at the ingredients of everything every day to make sure she wasn't consuming any. But
my wife has, after we were married, she was diagnosed with, she's going to kill me if I mention it, but.
Well, don't mention it. That's okay.
So,
a
chronic illness, as the doctors would define it.
Yeah, over time.
And a huge part of it is now, she can't have gluten as well. So
yes.
And then, I want to approach it because of my background. I say, go see the doctors and go take the pills. She doesn't want to do that still to this day. And you know what? There is some, I golf with people who are GMs of hospitals because the other diagnosis would be to give infusions for her thing. And and even the GMs, even though they're not doctors, GMs of those who hire the doctors would say don't do it, because once you start doing it, you have to keep doing it. You get into a whole realm of things. But anyway, point is, from the other way, I was challenged with the same thing, but having gone from atheist to Christian to challenge. Anyway, I agree with you.
Yeah, so that's sort of why, just briefly why I aside from that, I mean, I've gone through university. They teach you how to question your pre-held beliefs in a way that you have to provide good evidence for them. And it's not because they just want to get rid of God or something. It's because that's the only way we've been able to make the technological process that we have. All of these medical solutions have been provided by the scientific method, and sometimes Christians using the scientific method, or often Christians using the scientific method. I'm not disputing that Christians haven't contributed, but the way that they've contributed is by you leave your personal beliefs at the door and rely only upon empirical evidence that follows the scientific process.
I know that but again, you're ascribing this mystical scientific process as being something that doesn't ascribe to Christians, which isn't true.
Oh no, I'm not saying it's mystical in the slightest, and I'm not saying that I don't ascribe it to Christians. I'm saying that the process itself requires you to leave aside your personal biases and conclusions. Like if I went in there going, well, astrology is true, I'm going to factor that in.
I think the problem
would be unscientific. It's not just Christianity. It's anything that isn't empirical.
Well, we talk about, I think you and I, maybe you're on the stream, but I don't memorize the people's names. But the guy who was in the United States, he was the general manager of this hospital that delivered babies. And he couldn't, he didn't know why, but the mortality rate of children, or no, of mothers, excuse me, was greater for the ones in the hospital versus the ones that were on the street, which led him to investigate what was going on. And it turns out that the moms who were dying down in the what is it called? Whatever.
Maternity ward?
The place where they die?
Morgue?
The morgue, thanks. Yeah, the people so the nurses would also put the bodies in there and deal with that as well as deliver the babies. But there was no process to desanitize. And anyway, they just had a better mortality rate for the women, outside of the hospital versus inside. But he would write scientific papers announcing this throughout the United States and say, hey, but he would call these organisms ghosts. So he was pushed out of the scientific community. He was fired. He said, hey, this is what worked. We're going to use this. We're going to use a watered down chlorine substance to wash hands. But the whole reason he was shunned just because he used the word ghost, because he had a religious, terminology for it, right? But it doesn't change the fact that he discovered this.
How long ago was this?
Yeah, I don't know. I think you can look it up yourself. I actually learned about it, believe it or not, in a logic textbook. I still have it. I'm still unpacking from my move. But the person who picked up that discovery was a man named Germ. And that's where we got our word, our term germ from, right? But he was, given the accolades, but it doesn't change the fact that a religious man who went insane, who believed the Bible, still discovered it. It doesn't change the fact that was the case.
None of the stuff that he presented, I mean, you said he used the word ghost, but he wasn't talking about literal ghosts. He was talking about germs, bacteria, and other pathogens that sort of transmitted. So none of the work that he did on the germ theory of disease was in any way religious based. This is the mistake that you're making. You're sort of going.
No. Hold on a second. What I'm saying is
Pete,
the science.
Let me finish, please. So what you're sort of making something called the genetic fallacy, which saying, well, the origin of it has to decide what it is. Because the origin was from a religious person, then it is religious, and that's a mistake. Because germ theory of disease has no basis in religion.
Am I okay to talk now?
Yeah. Go. I've finished.
My point is that the guy, not that he discovered it because he was religious. I'm just saying that because he was religious, because he did reference the scriptures. He was aware of. He didn't mention it in the articles or anything like that, but he was somewhat religious and knew his Bible. Okay.
Sure.
Only slightly, as far as I can reckon. But because he simply used the language that he learned from the Bible in his papers when he was spreading this out, and this was right in the peak of Darwinism or whatever. I mean, this was the peak of right before World War II, if I remember correctly. And, the idea of science parting ways with, you understand what I'm saying. Just because he used terms like ghosts, which ghosts, could be just things that you can't see, he was chastised for it and pushed out. But a person comes along and just changes the words around to being more in line with science. It didn't have anything to do with him being religious other than just the persecution of it. It doesn't change the fact that he was the one that discovered it.
Yeah, so a lot of theories have gotten a lot of pushback over the years. They sort of the bar for getting scientific theory accepted is quite high, and for good reason. For instance, evolution was pushed back on very heavily when it was first announced, very heavily indeed. And that is yet again another theory that has turned out to be true. These theories that come out, like germ theory of disease, it got a lot of pushback.
Well,
but
hold on a
second. Accepted into scientific literature.
Look, Mark, so I want to let you keep talking. I do, but to say just blatant assertions like the evolution theory is true is rather of a stretch. And I'll just say, I just want to say that and you can keep going.
So you don't believe in evolution?
Of course not. Not as
Really?
far as I think that you define it.
What do you mean? Sorry. Okay, so evolution is the change of allele frequency over time, and that's a fact. We can see that
Say it
happen.
again. Sorry.
The change of allele frequency over time.
Oh, what a freaking wow.
Allele. Allele are
Oh,
the genetic markers in
right.
DNA.
So organisms changing over time.
Right.
Okay.
So simple organism change
DNA
over
charging
time.
over time.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I would agree with you that they change slightly, but I wouldn't
Yeah.
ascribe to your overall theory of evolution. I'm assuming you ascribe to.
Yeah.
But
So
I do think you know what? I was just thinking about this. You know, my daughter has dimples. I have dimples. She's beautiful.
Yeah.
Some people call me beautiful. I don't think that's evolution.
So evolution is.
It's so funny, Mark.
changes.
When you and I were saying, "Hey," when I told you I don't know what we're going to talk about, but usually it's pretty good. We just flow. That was the only thing that I could think of when I was walking into Safeway. My daughter's dimples.
But your daughter would pick up traits from you and traits from the mother, right?
Yeah, she's probably smarter than me.
Okay, and just say you had a ton of kids and some had dimples and some didn't have dimples, right? That you would say that that's more than possible?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so just
My
say
dimples
there
are pretty
was,
cute, though. I hope not.
Yeah, they are. So just say that there was people running around killing the kids without dimples for some reason, right? And your kids go on to propagate with the rest of society, who the kids without dimples, because they're not cute enough, are being killed by some organization. Just run with me on this one. I know it's a complete hypothetical.
Sure, I would agree. This is something that you believe in.
Well, I mean, that's just a sort of example of taking out a trait from the genetic population, right? So would you agree that eventually, after doing that a lot, then everybody would have dimples?
It depends on how far you go back, because I have witnessed
What do you
that
mean?
it can jump. It can jump generations. But let's just say,
Sure. Just say that happens for hundreds
the
of
people
years.
with dimples just, excuse me if I get it wrong, but the people without dimples just kept getting killed. Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yes, I would agree with you.
Yeah, so that's evolution.
Right. But that's just an idea in your mind, though, Mark. You haven't
What do you
come to
mean?
understand the
Just
truth yet.
agreed it would happen.
That's just a bunch of baloney.
Well, you just agreed that it would happen. So how is
Right.
it a something
But
in
think
your
about it,
mind?
though. I mean, I was just eating, let me, if it's okay with your audience, I'll just give you a bad example. You'd appreciate that, right?
I'd
A
love
bad
bad
example.
examples.
My father-in-law just went halibut fishing. And
Yeah.
if you look up halibut, right, it's a flatfish. So watching how it goes from, and I haven't dived into the science, I don't need to, and hopefully you have, but when it's a baby, it has two eyes on the same part of the head, right? It swims upright, and it slowly goes to being flat with two eyes facing upwards. There's a process involved, right, in that. Right. So how did fish dying off contribute to that?
Well, some traits would be advantageous for survival and some traits would not.
Sure.
For
So
instance,
like a fish.
Well, if you just let me finish, being flat generally enables fish to hide on the bottom kind of thing. So a lot of flash fish like flounder, for instance, they actually have sort of two eyes on one side of their head. It's a huge advantage for hiding from predators. So the ones that have these traits will survive, while the ones that don't were killed off. So eventually those traits became fixed in the population, and then it becomes the normal physiology of that creature.
Am I okay now? Yeah. So what about the fish? And by the way, it's really cool that you're in Australia, right? Even though you sound like an Englishman. No, I'm just joking.
I don't sound English.
I know. I knew you would hate that. No, but it's cool that I'm in the United States. You're in Australia. How cool is this? It's just
it's
fascinating to
amazing.
me. It's wonderful.
The internet is like a hive memory of humankind. It's incredible. Like when you understand how routing works of the internet, it is such an amazing thing to be able to not just go to the other side of the world, but go to a specific machine on the other side of the world, a specific router. It's amazing.
But before we get into that topic one day, hopefully not tonight,
Sure.
or this morning, or whatever it is over there. But when it comes to the flounder or just
halibut.
any flatfish, right? Halibut.
Yeah.
What about the ones that had the eyeballs kind of like not quite on one side or the other, but didn't quite make the eyeball all the way? Like, do you think that formed part of the process? Like the one whose eyeball was just kind of shifting a little bit, like was just kind of cross-eyed, just did better than the other ones? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Like he just had one
absolutely.
eyeball just slightly kind of like screwed off to, some other place.
That might not be the case, but it may be the case. And so what you've got to remember is that there's no one survival strategy that animals or organisms in general have. So they may have had, or they did have, a common ancestor that produced different types of fish. So another fish may have, their survival strategy was just be able to swim really fast, like really fast. And so you get these real fast swimmers because they have bred with other fish that are the same.
But let's talk about the eyeballs.
Okay.
Okay. So are you telling me that the one where was just like are you telling me they started off as fish that had eyeballs all looking kind of the right way?
No, I'm saying
Possibly.
they started off as an organism that was related to both fish and flatfish.
Okay.
So I'm not
they
saying
had they had eyes like a normal fish and like a flatfish, like 4 eyes?
No. Look, okay. I'll try to look up the common ancestor of the two.
I would like to see that ancestor. Did I lose you, Mark?
I'm just my keyboard is aggressively loud, so I'm just
Oh, okay. I just don't want to cut you off. I don't mean to.
No worries. No, my keyboard is aggressively.
So, as a former atheist, when I look at things like this, and I'm trying to stick on this one tiny example of so many other organisms out there, it's just hard for me to fathom that like some fish, just ones whose eyeballs were slightly separating, survived over the other ones to slowly become this flat fish that was able to, I don't even know, man. I mean, just make eggs, and then like through this process of becoming a regular fish, all of those fishes who happen to kind of flip sideways over like a period of time got to have both their eyes. Like the whole thing just sounds silly to me as a scientific loving Christian man now. It just sounds silly, Mark. And this is just when I get to the heart of it. Like there's just so many examples of that in nature. It just sounds, and you're going to run into this. When are you going to debate Kent Hovind?
I think that's on Tuesday night. Hold on, I'm just trying to get my thing there. Okay, and present checks.
So like I used to operate under the assumption, because it's pushed onto us just like a giant wave.
So that's the rosefish. It's sort of similar to the ancestor of both fish and flatfish. And you notice its eyes are very, very close to the top and very large kind of thing. It's per conformorpha. It's a clade of ray-thinned fish, but they're sort of from the Cretaceous. So if you go back and look at how they diversified, like even that would have turned into all of these different types of fish, but they go further back kind of thing, if you get what I mean. Back to these forms, the telos. And this is all, I have looked at sort of biology, but it is something that I'm only dabble in. Like, I'm no expert, but this is sort of what they do to find out how all of these were related and how they turned into all of these. Because don't forget, it's not just, oh, we've got this rose sort of fish, and then we've got all of these other fish. They found intermediates between all of them. So ones where the eyes are, one's prominent and the other one's small and moving up towards, because
They
it's
found that.
looking.
Where's that at? That's what I want to know.
I don't know, but there's other reasons for. Oops, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm bad at this, but yeah, that's sort of, so that fish is a lot more basic in appearance than either your flat fish or your modern standard. I'm trying to remember the name. Ichthya something. So, and there's other reasons as well why we think that these evolved kind of thing. DNA evidence is the most reliable evidence, as well as the fossil record and things like this. And you can sort of go, oh, that sounds ridiculous. Well, that's sort of just an argument from personal incredulity. It's sort of saying, well, I don't believe it, so it can't be true, as opposed to this mountain of evidence, including DNA evidence, as to why it is true.
You showed me a bunch of fish, Mark. You didn't show me the eyeballs moving over this. Get out of here, kitty. The eyeballs moving over the course of time. But I agree with. So let's go on. Let's take that assumption. Like let's assume there is something like that. But there's so many other examples. Okay. Just let me think of something.
How would I show you their eyeballs moving over time? How would you think that will turn out?
Well, it takes a second to think, instead of assuming the evolution is real, just think for a second, like how does natural selection, or even, what is it called? What is it called when they just randomly have changes that aren't come on, Mark, you're the expert.
I'm not sure what you're talking about, mate.
Here's a fruit fly in my wine. Kent Hovind uses the example when there's they have 5 wings instead of 4, maybe, or 3 instead of 2.
Mutation?
What's that called? Mutations. Yeah. Give me an example of how a fish mutated from being straight up to becoming flat, while it's coming from a baby to a grown up. Show me the fossils of this fish through the stages of its development.
So this is a phylogenetic analysis of caranigomorph fishes, reveals flatfish asymmetry rose in the blink of an evolutionary eye. Now this is sort of looking at the DNA and showing the relationships between these animals and the symmetrical fish, if you will, right? And a lot of it is very, very complex, right? I don't think I can just go, oh, well, here's the pictures of every single fish leading to this. This is insanely complicated and probably beyond me, to be honest with you.
I have a degree too, and trying to read some of that scientific.
I mean, I can send you the link for it. That's not a problem. I will send you the link. But
well, how about another example? Something where we can have a conversation for the viewers.
It's sort of okay. So, but I guess what I'm pointing out is you've got to be able to read stuff like this, right? You see what's on the screen?
Yeah, but you're pointing at a bunch of different fish, but you're not pointing. They're still fish. My point was the eyeballs, and none of them have any description of the eyeballs slowly forming over the course of them becoming an infant to a grown-up. I mean, there's no evidence.
No. Stop, PTown. You've completely misunderstood. This isn't a case of a single fish getting the eyeballs to rotate on their body. What we're talking about here is tiny changes from generation to generation. So, like
You're missing the point then. You're missing the point then, Mark.
I'm not sure I am.
Okay, it starts off not
Give you
just as a
this.
fish with its eyeballs on the top. It starts off as a fish with its eyeballs normal, like a normal fish, and then as it gets older, it becomes a flatfish.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So the way that embryology works, embryos kind of start out what they used to be, right? And then they,
Okay.
like, for instance, humans start off with these things that look like gill slits. They develop into gill slits in fish, but they don't develop into gill slits as human. They develop into laryngeal arches. But
Okay, so
they start
that's a
out at the
good
same thing,
explanation. That's a good explanation. Okay. So I'm
right?
gonna
So
accept I'm gonna accept your opinion. Okay. Now let's go to another topic. Is that okay?
yeah, I'll just put
I
this
think
in
that was a good
5
explanation.
and I'll put it in normal chat as well for everybody. Oops. Yeah, that should be fine. Hopefully you can find the article off of there. Yeah, so yeah, and it's incredibly complex, the development of embryos into the full formed creature. Like I totally get it. Like, and even there's some animals which their formation is incredibly late, like frogs, for instance, that are tadpoles,
Right.
and then they change into frogs, right? They metamorphosis. That's incredibly complicated, and the reason why they do that is incredibly nuanced. I get it. It's very hard to understand, but yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, let me think of another example. Okay, so butterflies.
Yes, they metamorphosis. Yeah.
Right. So from your explanation of evolution, where you're treating this fish that's a fish for quite some time as still being in the embryo, right? And then even though it's not in the
Right.
embryo anymore, it's actually out in the ocean and
Well,
slowly
it's in a
changing, but it's still kind of like the embryo, which was a good explanation. It was
yeah, it's
good.
in a
Okay.
juvenile stage. I
Well,
guess you could sort of
now try to tell me the different, like how a caterpillar and a butterfly. How does
well,
evolution?
that's different. That's not evolution. That's metamorphosis.
Okay,
That's
so how did
the
so evolution didn't contribute to metamorphosis, or what? What's your
well, no,
explanation?
it did contribute to the act of metamorphosis, but the act of metamorphosis, or the process of metamorphosis, is not evolution. Evolution is traits being passed down over generations, right?
But
Whereas metamorphosis is the change from a adolescent form into a adult form, which fish don't do. It's sort of the total transformation of the body. Usually, when it's cocooned up or something like that, it changes completely. That is not evolution. It might be
so
a trait that
evolution did not contribute to this process then.
well, it contributed to the process being selected for the butterfly to do, but it is not like, oh, well, the animal changes from a caterpillar to a butterfly. It evolved. That is not evolution. Evolution is saying, okay, it used to be in maybe a member of the insecta that did not metamorphosis, and because it was advantageous for that organism, that was selected for. Does that make sense?
No, none of it makes sense, is my point. Like, Mark, just
Okay, so
imagine it for a
what's
second from my perspective, okay?
okay?
Because you're operating somewhat, because we agree, we have no clue. We have no clue how that came about. Can we agree on that, at least? That we don't
What do you
know.
mean, no
Like, we
clue?
don't know
What do you mean?
how, we don't know, like, and hopefully you can agree, no scientist actually knows how a caterpillar went into a cocoon and
Do you
then
mean
became
why?
mush, and then no, we just don't, well, sure, whatever you want to call it, but and then into a butterfly. We don't know anything about that. We can't replicate that. We can only just observe with our technology what's happening. We can't explain it. Can
Well,
we agree? We really can't.
No, I would disagree with that. We can sort of give explanations. I mean, what level of certainty are you talking? I mean, we think we know why they do it. It's to reduce competition between the larval stage and the butterfly stage. They occupy different ecological niches. So while the caterpillar feeds on leaves, the butterfly actually goes out for nectar. They feed on totally different stuff. So that stops pressure from the adults being put on the larval stage.
So I just don't. Let me just help me here.
Yeah.
So all of the, I don't know. I guess the whatever, like all of the ones that just couldn't create a capsule that created a butterfly, all of those ones died off, right? All those caterpillars died off. Something like that happened.
Yeah, but the problem is that they probably weren't the modern version of caterpillars at that stage. They were probably insects, and some of them had a beneficial mutation that allowed them to feed on nectar and take pressure off of the young ones in their area. And that led to them being able to survive. And so that trait was fixed. Now, do I know exactly how it happened or why it happened? No. And, that is why we think that's what happened. It may have had other benefits that maybe we're unaware of. But this whole idea of we don't know exactly what happened, that's not... I mean, we do sort of know, and it's been demonstrated why these things have evolved. They always have some sort of survival or reproductive benefit. Even the birds that have survived because they do, mating rituals, funny dances, that is perfectly explained by evolution. Perfectly.
Well, I used to believe that. In fact, when I was, and you'll find this kind of funny, Mark, okay?
Okay.
And just for your audience, okay, that I wasn't atheist. I was vocal about it. Why? Because of the same reasons that you are now. Because I don't know you that much, but part of that has to do with your mom, right? And you're secular, or not. What's the opposite of secular? You were brought up that way, right? And she's drinking like scorpion juice. I'm sorry, man.
No, it's okay. I don't really, but that wasn't a religion. It was just a failure to apply critical thinking.
So I'm at prom. Okay. I can't remember, homecoming or prom. No one else is dancing. Okay. And I'm with my hippie buddies. So we just watched a documentary on TV about how birds just like, because it's kind of like that, attract mates. So we're out there and we're dancing like chickens, like birds, just thinking it's funny because we like to be stupid together.
Sure.
And the whole thing was just this spin off of, hey, we're trying to attract a mate. And in this small group of friends, we thought it was just stupid funny. Now I look back and even now I'm talking about it, it sounds so stupid. But
it's not stupid to the birds, right? They do attract.
It's not stupid if you believe in evolution. We're just out there, flat, just showing our muscles, just doing the bird dance.
Well, hang on, PTown, would you agree that the birds that do put these displays attract mates?
Well, see, I think that you should test that using your methods.
Well, we have. They do.
Take the bird, shave his hairs off, and see who has sex with who. I think that maybe the naked bird might get more, possibly. Would that change your belief in not believing in God?
We don't have to. We've studied the birds that sort of put on these prolific mating things and birds that do less.
Have you shaved the bird? Have you shaved the bird naked and had him go out there and...
Yeah, so PTown, I got to stop you there, and I kind of came for a good discussion, and now it just seems like you're.
It sounds silly though. Just before I agree with you. It sounds silly, Mark, but I just heard about this study not that long ago where literally someone did this, and it turns out it's not true.
Can you link me that study?
I can't because I can't remember
Okay.
what
Well, I
it
mean, I
was.
can try and find it, but I'm not aware of this study.
That's why I mentioned it, though, just so you know, it's not rooted in just me making fun of stuff. I mean it. It literally is a thing. Someone actually did this. A lot of what we're led to believe when it comes to birds and their mating.
Where did you learn about this study?
It was only like 3 weeks ago, actually. Yeah, someone actually had the audacity to challenge what you see on TV and stuff, on documentaries. Someone actually did it. So I can see how I can come up, you know,
Yeah,
sound offensive. I
I
really, honestly, it's not me saying
so
it.
so P-Town, I get you, and you probably heard this in creationist circles. I've never heard about that before, and I would love to see the paper on that and why
Okay, I'll
that.
find it for you. Because I think I was in the same boat as you, honestly, being a former atheist, like, okay. And I actually looked it up.
Have you seen this paper?
I haven't. I think it was peacocks, though. You can, if you have a computer, you can look it up. They actually take their feathers off, right? I did. I tried to find it to answer your question.
All I'm finding is stuff that's like it's important to court shit. I'm trying to find it.
But I had the same reaction you did, especially since I did that at prom or homecoming, whichever one it was.
Well, the peacock, sort of, we think it's used in sort of mating rituals to attract a mate, but also it sort of looks like eyes. So there's a secondary function for those feathers that it looks like a lot of animals in the undergrowth kind of thing. We also think that they use it as not only a threatening kind of bunch of eyes, but also, things generally go for the eyes. So it's better for them to go to their feathers than anything else. But I'm trying to find this paper and I cannot find it. So I would like to know why they think that peacock feathers disprove sexual selection, which has been sort of reinforced, and we've seen it again and again and again.
Let's assume that it's true. Is that okay? Or we don't have to, Mark. But can we?
No, just one second. Sorry, Wesley, no, mate. No, I'm sorry. No. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I don't. I'll look for it. Sure.
Yeah. I'd like to read it actually. It's maybe not your fault, P-Town, but a lot of the times, I've been given a paper for something, and I know that Standing for Truth, Donnie does this a lot, and we get into a bit of disagreement about it. And people like Otangelo, they'll take one part of a paper and sort of go, "Oh, this disproves whatever you're saying," and ignore the conclusions sort of reached by the end of the paper and the the rest of it, and really just take one thing saying, "Hey, we're not sure why this happens," and say, "Well, then it's completely disproved."
I'm going to send you my email, so you have my personal email.
Sure,
don't share it with anyone, but that way you can send me stuff.
If you put it in private chat, or only us will see it, and I'll send you something.
So I can't access private chat after we end. So, but I'll put it in there. Yeah, I'll put it in the private chat. Yeah. No, I agree with you. I feel the same way when it comes to the other side too. So I understand where you're coming from.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying that it's not out there and they haven't done this, but sort of sexual selection is one of those things that it's been absolutely concreted that if you do things to attract a mate, no matter how ridiculous those things are, as long as the mates in that society reciprocate, your genes have a way higher likelihood of being passed down than somebody not doing it.
Sure. Do you remember last time we talked about my study? We only briefly talked about it.
Oh yes, that was smiling and the attraction of human females, basically. Yes.
Yeah, but males who are who are considered masculine versus, you know, not as masculine males, and the how smiling versus not smiling. Yeah. Well,
Right.
I never talked about the evolutionary psychology behind it, which is what got me, you know, the really low grade,
Why
because I
not?
used them. But I can talk about him if you want.
Well, why not? Why didn't you talk about the evolutionary, like link it up to evolutionary theory?
I did, but that was partly what got me in trouble at the time.
Well, didn't you just say because you didn't talk
I did
about
do it. I did.
Oh,
Yeah, I think that was partly what got me the low grade. Probably because the person was religious.
oh, well, that's not
I'm
right
guessing.
for a start.
Right. Oh.
Religion shouldn't come into science at all.
So there's this theory, and that's also been tested and whatever. Who cares? But the idea is when women or animals, from your perspective, are in heat, or you know, are ready to make babies, at that period of time, they're going to lean towards men who are going to be more going to be better daddies. No,
Okay.
no. It's the opposite. They're going to be leaned towards the ones who are more masculine, more manly.
Sure.
Okay, more manly, you know, because that's better. You know,
Yeah, sort of
the
that
ones with more
protective.
muscles, they're going to be sexier,
Sure.
you know,
Sure.
all that kind of jazz, right?
Yeah.
You know, kind of like me, you know, but you can't see me. And that was a joke, by the way. I'm actually nothing like that, but
Okay.
but you get my point, right? And then
Sure.
when they're not in that mode, when they can't conceive babies, then they're going to be all about the good guy, you know, about smiles and all that stuff. You know, take care of kids, listen. And this is real evolutionary psychology stuff.
Right. Why do you think they lean towards somebody who's bigger and stronger and sort of more masculine? Why do you think that?
Ooh, so you want to play that card. You want to talk about the evolution behind what makes women find men attractive. You want to talk about that? Because that's what I thought at the time. Oh yeah, no, this is what I used to believe, right? I mean, this is right before I started becoming a Christian.
Why is that wrong? Like you've just pointed out something.
I was on the same page as you. I agreed with you. Yeah. At that time when I believed in that, it wasn't wrong.
But you don't believe in that anymore.
No.
But why? Like you've just pointed out. Well, so if you've said, okay, I've got a reason why women are attracted to the more masculine men while they're in heat, it's because they are having or potentially having a child. Sort of animals have children, and they're looking for somebody to protect both them and the child. And evolutionarily, this makes perfect sense. Why then, if that's wrong?
I mean, we can get into this giant hypothetical conversation about, do you really think that guys with big muscles and strong chins really would survive better in the wilderness than someone with a smart brain? Like, do you really think that
today or in the past?
In the past.
Today or
do you think more muscles over brain would work?
Yeah.
You do? Yeah, I disagree with you because I believe in the Bible. I think that
if you're talking about surviving in a tribe or in a community, maybe not. If you're talking about who's going to be hunting and gathering and doing high endurance, because don't forget, our hunting used to be persistence hunting. You basically run after animals for hours upon hours on end, right? And that's what got you the food in the past when we're hunter-gatherers kind of thing. This is before civilization, during our evolution. That is why the attractive one is the one that is muscled and strong and able to run for hours and hours on end.
So my wife is really, really, really attractive, and I'm not quite so much. I mean, am I evidence against evolution?
No, because we don't have the same ideas about people as we used to. The idea that it is only sexual attraction that determines who you end up with isn't actually a thing anymore. There's lots of things that we developed through evolution that we don't actually implement anymore. For instance, fight or flight, for instance, the fight or flight response, pumps adrenaline, kind of thing. It isn't that useful anymore. We don't have these situations,
but
where
we still
really
have it
need
though.
to do it.
We still have it, and we
Sure.
call it stress, right? This is the whole. This is not my view, but this is the evolutionary view, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And in turn, according to evolutionary psychology, my wife met me when she wasn't in heat. Sorry, I have to laugh. But
I don't think it's only in heat, because humans don't have a in heat section generally. We don't have that. Not like you're talking, horses and stuff go into heat. That's not how hominoids work.
So can we go to the monkey stuff? Is that okay, Mark?
Sure. I mean, we already are.
Okay, you said right. What's the word? Hominoids?
Hominids. Yeah.
Okay, so there was one discussion you and I had when I just lost it, and you wanted to know in the beginning of this whole discussion what would challenge my belief, right? You want to know something, and I haven't asked you the same, but I when you mentioned humanities, or would it be honkies, like monkeys, but honky? What is it? Humanitangs.
I'm not.
Is this
sure
a real thing?
What is a real thing? What are we talking about?
Maybe it wasn't you. Sorry. So in one of the discussions I had, they were saying that someone's actually made a humanitang. Like that would shatter like my belief in the Bible. Like it would have a huge. I mean, it would be very challenging for me to conceptualize of this, even though it's just basic. But do you believe in a humanitang?
I don't. I've not heard.
Okay,
of it.
Okay. Never mind. You weren't on that stream. Never mind. I'm sorry. That was my fault, Mark. I thought you were on it. There was sometimes when I come on something, there's like 6 or 7 people tag teaming. The one Bible believing Christian,
sure,
where
sure.
I get people mixed up, and I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have no idea. Humanitang. I mean, our DNA is remarkably similar, if that's what they're talking about, but I've never heard of this before.
No, everyone wanted to claim to me that there's actually been humanitang.
Were they talking about a common ancestor between orangutans and humans?
No, that someone actually made a humanitang. I think I don't want to say something that I'm not. I think that they made him in a test tube. I went and looked this up, okay, after our discussion, and I think that maybe someone made something in like a test tube, like tweaked some stuff and implanted. I think that's different than
There's no
saying
reason we can't splice orangutan DNA into humans or vice versa. I mean, they're remarkably similar. I think about 93% similar. They're incredibly similar.
Anyway, if a woman birthed a humanitang, that would shatter my belief in the Bible.
Why would we expect that to happen with everything we know about speciation?
Anyway, I of course would not expect it.
Right. It's just it's kind of weird to even sort of.
I had to go look it up. I thought that
Yeah,
there was a humanitang out there.
I don't know, but I would believe more readily that a human Z would exist first. Like chimps are incredibly similar to humans, like 98% similar or so.
If there was a human Z, that would contradict scripture, I think. I mean, it's just
possibly one could be made, but it'd be in a lab. It wouldn't be in the species of humans, Homo sapiens and pan troglodytes, has diverged completely. It would be sort of like, why can't cats and dogs breed? Because they had a common ancestor. They're too genetically different. It's a weird thing to expect. It would be a very weird thing to expect for two separate species to be able to produce offspring. It's very weird.
okay. I get your perspective now.
This is what gets me. It's so weird to have Hovind go, why doesn't a dog bring forth a cow, or whatever he's on about at that stage? It's such a straw man of evolutionary theory, sort of saying, oh, well, why doesn't a cow give birth to a palm tree or something?
Well,
it's
Hovind doesn't like to admit it, but his role in the ministry, I think, is just to expose people to the fact that there is another view. I don't think his role is to get too deep into things. And if you would let me, I would say that you guys do the same thing he does in some way, shape, or form.
I would agree that some atheists do make straw man arguments, like the whole Sky Daddy stuff is a straw man. It's not actually what Christians believe. I think that I guess we all poke fun at one another, but in a serious debate, using that kind of argument is really dishonest, because it is a straw man of what the other side believes. Which is why you'll never find me in a debate going, oh, you've got a magic Sky Daddy who does all these things. No, I would never do that, because I know that is a straw man of what the theists actually claim. He will do things like misrepresent the phylogenetic tree by saying, hey, this child's one that I found that we would give to a primary schooler is somehow representative of the whole theory. It's dishonest, and he dishonestly misrepresents evolution to be something other than what it is. And so it kind of bewilders me why you're okay with that. Why that?
Well, you have to okay it in the sense where sometimes the majority of his battle is people who are doing the same thing, and sometimes that's all you can do is just throw. I'm imaging, a bunch of scarecrows being thrown back and forth at each other. I mean, it's kind of like that. That's the only weapon that you have sometimes when the other side's doing it.
Well, I'd like to be given the opportunity to address creationism fairly with Hovind, but he refuses to discuss it with me. He refuses to defend his worldview.
But it's the audience that he's more concerned about. Like, even now,
no. He's more interested in he will only discuss evolution, and he will only make these horrible straw men. And what straw man am I making in those debates? I'm not straw manning evolution. I'm addressing it properly as it should be. But it's a serious conversation. Like, where did humanity come from? And why are all the animals genetically related? And you've got a person on one side who is making up blatant misrepresentations of what the other side is saying. I think that he does every Christian a massive disservice. And, even though you said he convinced you, he's convinced a lot of atheists to leave religion, because the stuff that he says is so disingenuous and so dishonest. He's been told this a million times that, we don't think that dogs came straight from palm trees, but he continues to say it. He doesn't change what he says. He's not interested in the truth. He's interested in selling DVDs. You've got.
Hey, sorry about that. My wife was texting me.
Oh, no worries.
No, I disagree with you, but I also agree with you. I think from your perceptions. I know he's not interested in selling DVDs. Look at the man. He's poor. He's had such an influence on even you. He has had an influence on you. Everyone he's had an influence on within our spectrum of people that we like to talk to. Everyone knows who Kent Hovind is. He's played a large role in the ministry. He could be a millionaire if he wanted to be, even now. But he has always done it without really wanting money like people think. There's always a
I
challenge there.
I think
But
you're
I
wrong.
disagree. I think if he went into the realm of going to just make money, he would have made a lot of money. He's not a dumb man. He's
No,
not.
that's what he does. He runs we're not talking about a educated man who's worked in a field and become um, sort of learned in the field. He's a ex-con man that has made money through running a substandard and, quite frankly, almost dangerous theme park, if you want to call it that, who has also repeatedly asked for donations, requested people work for free. He is not a good person. And his misrepresentation of the theory of evolution, that the only way that Hovind has influenced me is to be held up as a example of what happens when you put your trust in somebody that does not deserve it, because he doesn't. He is a really, really bad person. He has repeatedly lied about evolution and what it entails. And the fact that you've watched him a lot and you still don't, I mean, sorry, PTown, but you still got tons of things wrong about the theory, just shows that you're not going to learn evolution from Mr. Hovind. You're going to learn what it's not, what a caricature of it is. And that's a worry.
No, I disagree with you. I think that I've approached everything with an open mind and a loving spirit to everyone,
I think you
honestly,
have,
including Hovind. I think that what he went through and what he continues to go through, it resembles what we're expected of experiencing as true Christians.
What do you
And
mean what he went through?
Well, despite what you'll see on TV or if you go to your local church, becoming a Christian is not goody two shoes. Everything's going to be good for you. Believe in God so good things can happen to you.
Yeah.
It's not that way. In fact, we're expected to have persecution. I believe that his reward is going to be grand, and I think he's going to wear a giant crown in heaven. I don't think he's a perfect man by any means. I don't think that he
Do you
is
think
fully.
he was persecuted when he was put in prison? Do you think that was persecution?
I haven't dived into it, but I believe that there's a certain measure of persecution. Yes, it wouldn't surprise me, is what I'm saying, according to the scriptures.
Why? What convinces you if you haven't dived into it?
I don't think we can go through a giant case just based into, but I'm basing my judgment on what he's done and what the Bible says.
What did he do?
What has he done? He's throughout the world. He is ascribed to what the Bible says, and he's held firm to it. Yeah.
So when you're
Despite the
talking about
opposition.
what he's done, does that mean that if he breaks the law, he's automatically being persecuted?
I'm not going to go into in the same thing I would do for you. It's just a rule of mine, Mark. If you were accused of tax evasion or anything, I would not. I don't believe in hearsay. I don't know anything about.
Well,
the
he's
case.
not accused.
Honestly, I don't know anything about the case.
Well, he's not accused. He was convicted of
I don't have an opinion, Mark.
Why? Sorry, it just seems weird, PTown, that you'd sort of defend him and say, hey, he's being persecuted when you don't know the details of the case. How do you know if you don't know the details of the case?
I haven't researched the case, but what I do know so far
Well,
just
then you
based
would
on what
not.
I've seen, is that the man is smart, and he devoted his life to. It didn't
Well,
do it for money, as far as I can see.
well, I mean, I'm not questioning his intelligence or his
So
dedication
would you
to his
agree with
faith.
me that before the whole ensemble of events that got him in trouble, he wasn't in it for the money? Because that's the
I don't
perception
know.
I've done.
I don't know.
I think it's pretty
I don't
clear
know.
when he didn't patent anything, and he just. I disagree with his view
What
that
would
he
he
shouldn't pay
patent?
taxes. I agree with him that he shouldn't pay taxes.
What did he patent?
You mean patent,
Yeah,
right?
what did he
Sorry, I just want to make
patent?
sure.
Yeah, or patent, or what would he have patented?
Well, one of his things was, hey, look, you can make copies of this, spread it around the world, and if you want to donate to me, then you can. Just, buy my stuff and you can make copies of it.
Right,
And it
that's
was,
marketing, or just
look,
sharing material. Sure. I mean, I got no problem with it.
I'm
That's
a free
fine.
market capitalist, right? So you don't have a problem with it either. I think that his
Yeah,
approach to it, whether it was genuine or disingenuine, is probably a combination of both, whatever you want to define it. I love Kent Hovind for what he's done for me and millions of others. He's opened up our eyes to the possibility of another view, and he has a lot of positive viewpoints. I know that your message board here, who hates me, is going to disagree. I think I've caught a few. And we should
Well,
let
that's okay.
Beamsy in. We should let, Titan Uranus in. We should and I think one of my buddies is on here, Wolf, and I need a
What
break anyway.
do you want to turn it into an open mic? I'm happy to. That's not a problem. I just thought you just wanted to talk
I love
one-on-one.
talking to you, Mark. You
Yeah.
and I think that we're on the same page in some sense. Hopefully we can stay on it, which is we're both looking for the truth in things. And this, you're in the same shoes I
Yes.
was. It's just I found
Yes.
it. You haven't yet.
Okay. Well, I mean
That was
that's
a
kind of
joke,
your
partly.
opinion. Yeah. But what I'm more
Yeah.
interested in, aside from what people say is the truth, is their methodology and how they arrived at that truth, and how they know that journey to the truth is actually reliable. Because everyone says they've got the truth. Everyone will say that. Like Scientologists will say they've got the truth. Mormons will say they've got the truth. Even the guy down the street that believes in aliens will believe that he's got the truth. What I'm
Can I cut you off? Do you think
not
so far?
now.
Do you think that I'm a Mormon, or the guy down the street touting, or the guy who thinks the
No.
aliens are here coming?
No.
Like, do you think any of this?
No, but I think you've got the same level of truth that they do.
Do you really think that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Why?
Sorry. Because the methodology that you're using to arrive at your truth is, well, not almost exactly the same, but it's on par with the methodology that they're using to arrive at the truth. That's why.
Am I subpar, or like, if this was a golf course, am I like a birdie, or am I a bogey compared to, or am I a par? You're saying par.
I don't know golf, so I have no idea.
You haven't played golf, huh?
No.
What do you guys do in Australia? Surf?
A lot of people surf. Yeah, I will.
What do you do?
What do you mean? What do I do?
Or what do you besides this? Do you have a hobby that's?
Yeah, I like gaming. I like working out. I like reading. I read a lot. There's a ton of things I enjoy doing. I enjoy swimming. I used to be a surf lifesaver when I was younger, so I still enjoy hitting the surf and swimming.
Well, one thing I love is that you love doing this, Mike. I appreciate you.
Yeah, I love conversations. I love talking with people. We can open it up to the audience if you want. If you're happy to still hang around and stuff, that's fine.
It's your show, Mark.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I don't want to, because I said we'll have a one-on-one interview and a discussion. I don't want you to feel like
we can keep going if you're enjoying this. But if you want to open it up at any time, I'm open to it. I know that it'll be like,
okay.
I know I'll be tag teamed. I would ideally like to have.
Look, I promise I won't let you be
like mauled.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mauled,
thank you.
I gotcha. So if anyone wants to join, feel free to come in. It's not going to be let's pile on PTown. That is not the aim for today. But if anyone wants to come in and ask PTown respectful and polite questions, then please feel free. And I am talking to you, Beamsy. You're not going to come in and insult people. Just saying. I love you, Beamsy, but yeah, that's not the intention for today. Okay. I'm sure there's plenty of streams out there that you can have, pile on of people if you want. So, but today we're just discussing stuff. But I do love the conversations. I really do. And I couldn't disagree with you more. But what was that phrase that I love from America that was like, I disagree with everything that you are saying, but I'll fight for the death for your right to say it. Right? Like, I
Who
think
said that?
I can't remember. It was one of the founding fathers, maybe.
Talking about whatever Patrick. Yeah, you're thinking of
no, it was Voltaire.
give
It was
me
Voltaire.
liberty or give me death? No, okay.
No, I think yeah, libertarians sort of, I think they take it a little bit too far. No, it was Voltaire. Yeah, I disapprove of what you were saying, but I defend to the death your right to say it. Oh no, Voltaire didn't say that. Okay, who knows who said it? Somebody said it. I
had a chance to read some. Yes, I believe in a young Earth. As far as I can tell, yeah.
Yeah.
I believe I believe in the Bible. Big bad mama.
So if science of sort of geology and stuff conflicts with the Bible, you'll believe the Bible. Have I got that right? That's your stance?
Well, I wouldn't put it that way. But I believe in the Bible. I would put it that I believe in the Bible and science confirms that.
Well, I don't think that geology would affirm that, PTown. I'm not sure why you would think that. Do you think that science says that the world is 6,000 or so years old, 6,000 to 10,000 years old?
According to my definition of science.
Well, according to my definition of science, really, I'm asking.
Possibly, yeah.
Okay, that's a little strange, but it's not what we'd call scientific consensus, right? It's not the consensus of the scientific community.
Your little buddies, yeah, all agreeing with each other. Yeah, sure.
Why do you think they're buddies? There's some very, very stringent disagreements in any scientific field. Why would you think that they're buddies?
Now's not the right time to talk about this.
Okay, all right. Well, let's get.
Do we have let Beamsy in? Come on, Beamsy. Beamsy.
Right. Hello, Beamsy. Welcome to the stream. Always a pleasure to see your face.
Oh, good. And you know pretty much that I'm a lot more politer in talking than I am in typing.
Oh, good thing I haven't been reading your stuff, Beamsy. Hey, I just want to say thank you for your service. Which country did you serve? Because I heard
Land Under.
Australia.
Oh, you're an Australian, right?
No, I wouldn't put it like that, but yes.
Sorry, let me work on that. Australian.
Oh, Mark, if you looked in your Discord, there are. I've sent you a couple of papers that would be interesting for your conversation.
Oh, mate, I'm on Do Not Disturb on Discord for a reason. How dare you? How dare you disturb me?
Yeah, well, the microbiology of the flounder would be the one that you would like because it actually shows the photographs of how the eyes shift from a normal fish into the standard one side.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, it does.
Beamsy.
Wow, Beamsy. Wow, dude. Yeah, nice work.
Can you guys put it on on the big screen?
Yeah, I'll try.
So, Beams, you got blown up by some stuff?
Couldn't tell you what it was. because I have no memory of it. I know I
Oh,
did
I'm
get
sorry,
it, but
mate.
it's a matter of I don't remember anything before that point.
Can I call you mate, even though I'm not Australian?
Hey, that's our word. Okay,
that.
so this is the thing that Beamsy's probably talking about, right? So you wanted to see fish turning in from like, yeah,
How do you zoom in from your phone here?
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, the flounder literally starts as a normal fish, and then
Yeah.
as it progresses through its life, it shifts
Yeah.
into that.
But how is this evidence that it slowly evolved that way?
One has a mutation which allows it to go the next stage further.
Mhm.
It was more beneficial than the stage before it. So it was
number
selected to.
G. Sorry, Beamsy, go ahead.
Yeah, it's the same thing with anything when it comes to natural selection. It was more beneficial to the organism than its prior form.
So, like, are you telling me that you see someone who's got like the eyes just not quite right on their head, like they're going to benefit from that mutation?
Well, no, they're not a fish that hides on the bottom of rivers and things. So yeah.
Yeah,
How would that be beneficial? How would that be beneficial?
Look, you
for a
guys,
human?
the fact that you guys can't admit that this just sounds crazy, just blows my
you
mind
make
right
it
now.
sound crazy by thinking that it's made the decision that it's going to go. Okay, this is the way that this is the way that's more beneficial for my way of living. No, it has a niche in its environment, and its body structure can change over time to be more beneficial towards that niche.
Beamsy, that's just dumb, though. I mean, think about it. The freaking fish is like eyeball just slightly shift, like it just shifts slowly. But only the ones that just die off, a bunch of them die off, and then during that process, and then only the one that actually has an eye shifting over this period of time. Now it becomes this fish that once it becomes born and it's in the wilderness under the sea, that slowly has its eyeball shift to the top of it, is the one that survives. The whole thing is just a fairy tale on a bunch of baloney, man. Can't you guys see this?
P-Town, I'll just interrupt. That's not an actual argument, mate. That's just sort of saying, hey, that's stupid, is in no way any kind of argument against it. It's just an argument from incredulity.
And you're trying to say that an individual fish went through these changes. No, it is across a population. So there's not an individual that has any of these sudden features that it is then the forefather of all its offsprings.
I'm sorry, I was trying to say it is a population that I was trying to describe. A bunch of fish are doing this, and then only a couple of them, or one of them, like actually survived and replicated. And I mean, I'm sorry, it just sounds so silly to me right now. I'm trying to imagine that this happened, but it just sounds so.
But
so silly.
But at one point, you sort of understood the way it happened. You believed in evolution, so at one point you did understand how it happened. So how did it change that suddenly you don't understand it?
No, it was just me holding my emotions back. I mean, I understand the idea behind what you guys think, but now when I look back on it as a Christian man, I just think it's just so silly. Like,
why?
Think about it, though. It doesn't make sense, guys.
Sure it does. It's the same process as if, I want a really big dog.
So did the eyeball, so like the fish who had the eyeball on the top. Sorry, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
It's okay.
I didn't mean to.
It's just if you want a really big dog, you just select the dogs that are really big and they will grow. right? And you can say, oh, but I don't understand how it can start out small and grow up to be this massive dog. Well, that's what you've selected for.
But this is different, though.
Why?
No, the traits are the same, regardless whether it's size, color, fur length, fur thickness, eye color. All these things are just traits.
They can be selected for. The only thing that's different is the process of selection here.
Okay, so can I just get clarification here? Sorry, I was multitasking. The eyeball slowly shifting, as this fish becomes, I know I'm using the wrong terminology, but, an adolescent to a teenager, okay, like it just slowly moves to the top of the fish. So the eyeballs are together, okay, and this fish becomes flat. Like, did one fish have to do better than the others where their eyeball was not quite to the top?
Yeah, so what
Is this
what
your
happens?
view?
Well, what happens is that you have mutations which bring up differentiation and new features, right? So the way that cells develop during the lifetime is they develop by having a end goal kind of thing. So one of the more recent discoveries is cells don't say, okay, I need to move from here to here. All they do is say, am I at the point where I need to be fully grown? No, they just move a bit more and then move a bit more. So the way that cells and growth occurs is actually a case of moving until they reach the destination, not a sort of linear, I've got to travel from here to here. So all that's happened is that a mutation has occurred and been distributed, which has the eyeballs at the top of the finished adult fish form. And so its cells don't get this command to go from there to there. All they get the signal for is you need to keep moving and growing. You need to keep growing. You need to keep growing. You need to keep growing. And eventually they will reach where the final mutation has them. And because that's incredibly advantageous, that fish has gone on to bred with a whole bunch of other fish. The fish that inherited this mutation have been incredibly successful. They've had a huge advantage over everybody else in the population. So they've gone on to breed as well. And that continues again and again and again over millions of generations. And eventually that becomes the standard physiology of that fish. Does that help?
No, you're gonna have to say that all again, actually.
Okay, so mutation has arisen where the eyes are on one side of the head. It's just a mutation for the adult version of the fish, right? So these errors arise, and they have to they get stuff arising that has a mutation. Now, if this is incredibly beneficial, which in the flounder's case it is, the cells don't get given instructions to move from one place to another. All they get told is they still have to grow or move over time, right? So it's not saying, hey, you have to be up here to the cells. All the cells are being told is, you need to grow more. You need to move more.
Can I confirm? Can I just clarify? So,
yeah,
in the beginning of this adaptation or mutation or whatever, does it have the mechanism where the eyeballs have to stop moving ingrained into them?
So the cells keep track of when they have reached their final growth forms. So basically what the cells are told is when they have arrived at the physiology that they need to
So this thing was, it was you're telling me that this particular fish or whatever had a mutation where some of them had one eyeball that was sprouted like slightly higher
Yeah.
on this side or that side or whatever, right? And then, okay.
Yeah, so may have
But
been sort of a mutation
again,
where
my
it's removed.
objection to all of this is,
Yeah.
okay, sure, let's imagine that that's the case, okay? Let's imagine that. But remember that this is just part of the evolution of the fish. It's like, at first it starts off not just ultimately just going to becoming a flatfish. There's a period of time when it's like a normal fish with one eye on one side, another eye on the other, and then it decides to go to becoming a flatfish.
Wait, no, not decides. Not decides. Let's sort of leave out.
I'm sorry for using that word.
That's all right. It's just, it sounds like Hovind. It just decides. No, it doesn't.
I don't know what else word to use. I'm sorry.
Okay, so a mutation will arise in an organism that has some kind of either detriment or benefit. In this case, like if that fish was a fox on land, for instance, right? A fox, and it had a mutation where one of its eyes was kind of, almost on the side or whatever, or almost on front, and it was sort of disformed. That would not be beneficial. That would be an incredibly detrimental mutation, because that fox would not be able to see one side of it. It's detrimental. But in this specific circumstance with the flounder, that is beneficial. Sorry, that's incredibly beneficial, because it can basically lie flat hidden on the bottom of the river and still view everything around it with bioptic vision. Incredibly beneficial. So these mutations just arise naturally. Sometimes they're detrimental and sometimes they're beneficial, depending on the environment that they arise in. So when you say it decides, it doesn't decide this. It's just, it gives birth. One fish gives birth to another fish. It has a mutation.
We don't observe, but this idea that you have, which when I say words like decide, I don't have a word for it. Doesn't matter what word I describe to it, you would find offense to it. It's still something that you have decided is true, and there's no evidence for it.
There's a ton of evidence for it. I mean, mutations happen all the time. Are you sort of denying that mutations happen?
There's no beneficial mutation.
Really?
You show me a fish who has its eyeballs, and all of a sudden it's on the top of its head. Mark, show me.
Yeah, that was the flounder we just looked at.
It's always been that way, man.
What do you mean it's always been that way? What do you mean?
A flounder's always been a flounder.
Can you demonstrate that?
That flounders make more flounders. I don't want to do the Kent Hovind thing. I don't want to be like that.
I don't want you to either. Because when you sort of say, well, flounders make more flounders, yeah, but we've seen flounders with mutations, right?
What kind?
What do you mean, what kind? All kinds of mutations. And we've seen humans with mutations. Are you saying there's no beneficial mutations whatsoever?
What's a beneficial mutation for a human?
Okay, there's a family that lived in the Midwest somewhere, I think, and a couple of their family members got into a car accident that was really awful, and none of them had broken bones, and nobody could understand why, because of a horrific accident. What they did is they actually did genetic sampling and found that they all had these genetic markers for very dense bones. It's a mutation. They just mutated so they have dense bones. Now, that bone density is incredibly beneficial if you're in a car accident and you need to have strong bones to prevent your bones from breaking.
But not if you're going to go swim. That's what you're going to
Right,
talk about.
that's what they found. They found that when those people went swim, they were terrible at swimming because their bones were heavy. They dragged them down. They were terrible at swimming. So what I was saying earlier, whether a mutation is beneficial or detrimental depends on the environment you're in, right? So when you say there's no beneficial...
entire, but their eyeballs didn't move from the side of their head to only one side of their head, and the whole world of humans hasn't, all their bones haven't become more dense. Like,
No, because
this is all just like,
yeah,
yeah,
because
some people have more dense bones than others. Who cares,
right.
man?
Well, in order to be
My daughter has dimples.
hang on,
and
hang on,
so
let
do
me
I.
finish. Let me finish. In order to be fixed in the population, you have to have a population that is one trait or one mutation is very beneficial, and not have genetic flow between other non other organisms without that trait. So if you've got a population and having dimples is incredibly beneficial, like I pointed out before, right? It will be fixed in that population, but we don't live in that world. We live in a world where it really doesn't matter whether you have dimples or not. And it really doesn't matter whether you have dense bones or not, because people aren't, not having dense bones and they'll definitely die in car accidents all the time. We're not in that environment anymore. So I don't know why you would expect something like that to be fixed in a population that survival is not benefited by that dense bones. But it still is a mutation and it still is beneficial.
Is it
Mark, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, sorry. I got you and my wife at the same time here.
Well, that's all right. Well, I mean, if you want to, if nobody else is interested in jumping on, and Beams, yeah, I want to give you a chance to talk, mate. So if you've got anything else that you think could be helpful for PTown to understand evolution, I'm more than happy for you to sort of say it.
Hey, Beamsy, good to see you.
It's just more the fact being that he's already made a decision, and it's very difficult to get through the choice that has been made.
Well, yeah, but he has changed his mind.
Beamsy.
Well, yeah, but he's changed his mind once before. There's nothing saying he can't change his mind again. I more look at it sort of, what is the reliability of the methodology you're using, PTown? And that's I guess where my grievance would be. I don't think the methodology that you're using is particularly reliable, and that's simply because I've heard it from tons of people who believe in different things. I'm really sorry, PTown. I don't mean to be insulting, but I've heard this same methodology from flat earthers, and you don't believe in flat Earth, do you? Of
course not. No.
Okay. Well, yeah. I'm sorry. I was just sort of assumed there when I probably shouldn't have. Yeah, I've heard the same from flat earthers and people that believe in aliens, and even the Bigfoot crowd. And like I said, I don't want to be insulting. I'm more paying attention to the methodology behind how they got to that belief. The epistemology, how you arrived at that belief. And to me, it just doesn't seem reliable.
I'm not the right person to get you ready for your debate with Kent Hovind. Evolution has not been my focus.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's not why you're here, PTown. It's really not, mate. Honestly, it's just interesting because that's sort of one of the things that's.
As far as I can define science, it is rooted in a methodology, and it is evidence based, and I think that's what makes me unique.
Okay.
I'm always looking for that person, the other person out there, where we can have the same discussions, but still, in the same way you think that I'm ignorant of your scientific, I don't want to say dogma, or your scientific realm, right? It's the same way I think you're ignorant of my foundation in scripture that is scientific. You're just going to assume that it's not rooted in evidence, which is not true. It's older than your dogma that you believe in. I believe in a dogma that was said before you, and is more accurate than the dogma that you believe now.
The
No,
thing
that's
is, it's not
fact.
accurate.
It
well,
is.
it's not
You can
dogma.
pinpoint all of the wrong stuff that's in there the way that you transcribe it to be, but it still doesn't change the fact that it is rooted in fact, that it is scientific.
So it's not dogma, because dogma is necessarily not open to change the way that scientific theory is. So it's by definition not dogma. It also, the age of something has no bearing on whether it's true or not. A lot of people in the past believe a lot of different things, and we know some of them are not true. That's just the reality of the situation. The age has no bearing on it. And you can call it dogma all you want, but that's not the case. I do have Tux coming in. I'm sorry, I'll let you answer, PTown. I'll just get Tux in afterwards, if that's okay.
No, bring him in. Bring him in. I
Okay.
don't know who Tux is. I was hoping Wolf would be here. I always enjoy him.
Oh, James Wolf? Yeah, he's great. Hey,
Yeah.
Tux, how you doing, mate? Welcome to the stream.
Hi, good evening, or good morning,
Either
good
way.
afternoon, wherever you are in the world.
It's okay. We all believe in a flat earth here, so we're all on the same. That's a joke. But
That is a joke, yeah.
Well, I don't do much of the conversation on evolution, but I do talk the Bible from time to time as an atheist.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be interested in talking about that tonight, Mark? Or PTown?
Oh, sure. Pete, if PTown wants to talk about it, this is really his interview time. So, whatever he wants to talk about is fine, or not. It's okay by me.
yeah, whatever Mark wants to talk
So
about.
when you were
Go ahead.
when you were an atheist, or at least a non-believer, I'm not sure what the
That would be me. Yeah.
Yeah, what the so what was your opinion of the Bible as a non-believer?
Well, that's a very broad topic, but if I looked at it like, come on now, Adam and Eve, they're naked in the garden. You got this kind of comic book idea in your mind of these fables that can't possibly be true, and then you have Noah's flood. You got a giraffe sticking out of the frickin' wooden boat. The whole thing's ridiculous. The Bible is absolutely ridiculous until you come to understand the truth.
So what is that truth you think that sold you on becoming a Christian?
There was enough scientific evidence that led me to believe and consider the idea that it was based in fact.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I can't fill all of the gaps yet. I mean, and when I say fill, I could fudge it, right? I could make sense of it if I really tried. But still, that's not enough for me. But I was okay to the point where, the possibility is still there. Hopefully that answered your question.
I mean, not really, but I asked a broad enough question where it does, in a way. When you read the Bible, what's say your favorite part or favorite story, favorite parable?
So it goes back to when Mark and I were talking. He was talking about his mom and how it impacted him, right? Where she was religious in some way, shape, or form, and she tried as much as drinking scorpions. And I don't want to say anything bad about Mark or misrepresent his background, but that was my interpretation, and I could relate in some way. But my wife was sick with, and she still is. She has ulcerative colitis, a lot like the woman who bled for 12 years before she touched Jesus's apron or robe. Doctors will say it's a chronic illness, but anyway, when she was first diagnosed, when we were recently married, she wanted to read the Book of Job, and this was when I was first grasping the concept. I was baptized. Maybe not yet. I can't remember actually. Maybe I was already baptized. But just looking around as we were going to her attorney function on the mountain, I was looking like, you know what? From a scientific perspective, God made this world. Now that I'm driving through the mountains and seeing how, only the tips of the mountains and trying to measure how big the mountains are relative to the rest of the world. Especially since we couldn't see the mountains when we were driving towards them, and I'm starting to realize, okay, God made this. And she wanted to read the book of Job just because she was suffering at the time. And if you know the book of Job, a lot of Christians will go to it just to understand the concept of suffering. But what I found when I studied it, excuse me, I'm a bottle of wine in. When I was studying the book of Job, I realized how scientific it really is. And I started to dive into the specifics, and I was astounded by it. Even though I was still on the fringes of being Christian, I started to catch a glimpse of the reality of how God is scientific.
But not one person has ever shown anything scientifically accurate within the Bible.
What's scientific about
Beamsy throws that out there, but there's so many that would deny what he's saying.
Name one.
Okay.
Yeah, what's the most prolific?
Well, anytime you want to throw out like what's the most scientific, like you're just casting out a trap.
No, I ask you to name one. Just one.
I'm not just going to name one, Beamsy.
Okay.
Then your
Is it
claim
my
is irrelevant
imagination, or
and you have
is
nothing.
Hold it.
does this seem wafty?
So what I was wondering is what is scientific in the book of Job? Hello?
I wish I had my Bible here, but there's quite a few of them.
Okay. Well, I mean,
If you guys have your computers up.
yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah, I've got Bible Hub bookmark, baby.
Oh, I like it. You're all atheists, right?
Yeah.
No, I'm a pagan.
I am an atheist.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Beamsy is like a step
yeah,
above being atheist, right? And that's pagan.
Yeah.
Is it really,
I actually somewhat believe that there's a creator. I just am an atheist to Jesus and Yahweh, or any god in literature.
So what do you mean by a creator if not a god?
Something's in charge of us, but we're just an organism as a part of another organism that's a part of an entity kind of thing. I just don't know.
Sounds like pantheism almost.
It might be pantheism.
Panpsychism?
Let's just say I've had a vision and it put me on the path of atheism, even though I kind of was on the path to be a Christian, or maybe even a Gnostic Christian. But having the vision, I don't know for sure. It's nothing but the neural firings in my head. But something feels like it's in charge of us, but they don't care. He, they, them, all of them, whatever it is, it does not care what we do, honestly. It doesn't care that you're a Christian, PTown. It doesn't care that I'm an atheist.
I'm not saying.
In fact, use a biblical reference, your God does not exist. I'm confident of that. If your God exists, I think it is nullified and void after Genesis 3:1.
God loves you, and I love you, my brother, my future brothers. Let's dive into the book of Job.
Well, for somebody who said it was science that brought him, but couldn't define the most definitive one or anything like that, you're a little.
That game.
You're a little waffly. I don't know what to think of you.
Well,
I just got love, so I don't know what to think of that
I still
either.
love you. Yeah, yeah.
Well, P-Town,
Been honest. I'm drinking a little bit, but I'm trying to tell the truth here. There is a lot of science in the Book of Job. I think that
So I've just
anybody
come
with an
to-
objective mind would agree with me.
Well, I've just come to Job. I mean, I've just scanned through Job. I've just come to Job 3:8, 3:8 to 9. Let them curse it that curse the day who are ready to raise up the morning. Let the stars of twilight thereof be dark. Let it look be light but have none. So do you actually think the stars went out as part of this curse? Is that scientific?
Look, you're just trying to find a random verse and trying to discredit what I believe, and you can do that if you want, but it's not going to help you find the truth.
Well, I mean, I'm just scanning through it and trying to find.
You have to understand the whole. I mean, this whole dialogue throughout and the patterns of it. You have to approach it with an open mind, with an objective mind, and you'll see the truth. And it's beautiful.
Well, I am addressing it with an objective mind, or as objective as I can be while still using my mind, because everything that goes through a mind is subjective, unfortunately, because perception.
Yeah.
There's just a lot in the Book of Job. There's a whole lot in there that's philosophical, and that opens up a whole lot of different bottles of wine, kind of like what I'm used to tonight.
P-Town, we're not talking about philosophical things in the Bible. We're talking about scientific things in the Bible.
Right, and I'm trying to bring it back to the same point. Yeah, that we're on the same page. I'm just trying to redirect you. You want to point out other things. I want to bring you back to the science part of it.
And I asked for one point that is
but you haven't named one.
I haven't gotten
that's somehow out of bounds. I don't understand.
Earlier today. There's little things like in the Book of Job, it's going to mention the fact that light travels. Okay, it's a simple thing. Okay, here's another one that there's a balance between the weight of air and how it contributes to wind. How the sunlight influences that balance, right? These are things that we've only recently discovered, even though we all know it to be common sense now. It's still in the book that's notably the oldest book in the Bible to most historians. And let's not go down that channel of conjecture, but there are a lot of scientific things in there.
Well, usually my experience of scientific things are people pointing to verses that are very vague and sort of saying it's saying this scientific truth. As I said earlier, people from Islam do this a lot. And I'd like to see the verse, so maybe you can look it up and send it to me or something if you do think you have scientific stuff that they should.
Well, here, have you perceived the breadth of the earth, Mark?
Have I perceived the breadth? The earth doesn't breathe.
Yeah. Declare. Okay, so have you perceived the bigness of the earth?
Have I perceived the bigness of the earth?
The size of it, yeah.
In width and
Declare if thou knowest it all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've perceived that we are on a. I perceive that there's a lot of land around me. I'm not sure what you're asking here. This is very vague. I mean, I've stood on a mountain and said, "Hey, that's a lot of land. That's pretty big."
Well, here, let me just skip a few verses. But by what way is light parted?
By what way is light parted?
Without looking it up, just by what way is light parted?
I don't think light is parted. I don't know.
So what
you mean the difference between a shadow and a sunbeam?
Sure, possibly. But what way separates light?
Matter?
Yeah.
What
no, you cannot separate light. You cannot
there's light earth. And there's absence of light.
Let's assume that we're talking about the earth here. What, according, like there's sun that, brings light, right? Light comes from the sun, right?
Well,
and what parts it? By what way is light? Yeah.
Well, I mean, but light also comes from candles and torches and things like that.
In this case, we're talking about light coming to the earth. By what way is light parted?
By matter? I don't know what you're asking.
Possibly, I think in this context, according to Job, it would be water or rain or water. Okay, but the fact that light is parted, which is what we get the spectrum from, would be.
Okay, you're talking about reflection. You're not really talking about parted.
I'm just saying what the Bible says. That's all I'm.
Reflection and
it's
refraction.
Parted. I'm just saying it's parted.
Refraction.
The Bible says it's parted.
So
By what
you're
way
talking
is light
about-
parted?
So you're saying that
prism?
He's
the
opening
Bible,
up the question.
Like by a prism, you mean?
do you make a rainbow? Because apparently the rainbow was put there as God's covenant with humans. It wasn't.
And that was when
Yeah,
clouds were formed, according to the Bible, too, as far as I can tell. Yeah.
So
There's
one
some
thing
little-
that baffles me about your approach here, PTown, is that you're a Christian and your favorite area is the persecution of Job and the relentless attacks, essentially part of it, or just the science. When you say the science and you talk about light being in a portion, if this was explained through science measures, it's not going to change that you're a Christian.
It had a huge impact on me based on, like, discovering that the Bible is divine was tremendously important to me. And this was part of it.
I found the verse that you're referencing, PTown, so I want to go through it, okay, and see where you're getting this from, because it sounds to me like you're saying they knew that rainbows were caused by the refraction of light through water. Is that what you're saying?
Well, if you can't just get that from Job, but again, I don't want you guys to jump to conclusions.
What are you saying there? What are you saying there?
If you part that with Genesis, yes, you can defer that. But I don't want you to think that it's just one thing that made me believe in the Bible, which is always what people want me to do. What's your one thing? No, it's hundreds of them that made me want to believe in the Bible.
Let's go through this thing and see where you're picking up. Because what we've been talking about is your methodology for finding convincing evidence. Yeah. So really, let's see whether this is a good methodology for finding this conclusion or not. Because if you're just saying, oh, there's hundreds of things, let's not look at them, then your methodology is just to not look at the reasons why, or examine the reasons why you believe what you believe. And I don't think that's a particularly reliable way to find the truth. So I'll read it out, which I have reserved against the time of trouble, against the day of battle and war. By what way is the light parted, which scattereth the east wind upon the earth? Who hath divided a watercourse for the overflowing of waters, or a way for the lightning of thunder, to cause it to rain on earth where no man is, on the wilderness wherein there is no man? I don't. It sounds like it's just attributing a whole bunch of natural things to a god. It doesn't say that water is what parts the light. In fact, it says, by what way is the light parted, which scattereth the east wind upon the earth?
Sure. So it's making other connections within the Bible that make it make sense to me, because I completely agree with you. I like your mode of logic, Mark.
Well, it just sounds very vague. You could get a
Sure, no, I agree with you, and that's where it's connecting the other scriptures that make it make sense, and it takes a lot of work. Doesn't help with.
So basically, we've got to stand on one leg, squint, turn our head to the side, stick our tongue out the side, and make a funny face, and then we might see what you're talking about.
Wouldn't you like that, Beamsy? But it's more like spanking you on the ass and making you have a funny face. That's what it really
baby,
is.
Are you threatening me with a good time?
You know you like it, baby.
Don't threaten me with a good time. We love that saying at my work.
So I just moved into. I just got a house, and I have boxes everywhere, and one in the garage, and I don't have my Bible, but I have this all labeled and highlighted. So now I'm just operating off of my memory, which,
Well.
believe it or not, is not the best. Especially.
So I guess my
So
problem
if you jump back, I agree with you, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If you go though,
But
you
you've
have
got
to
to
tie that to other parts.
Sorry, PTown, go ahead, mate. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I get that. You have to tie it all in, but you've got to acknowledge that other people read the same stuff and they get a totally different interpretation,
Yeah.
and one that doesn't align with what you're saying.
Yeah. So I'm trying to look it up as we go here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
So
I
just
guess,
bear with me here. So if you just give me a millisecond.
Is this something, P-Town, that is sufficient? It's sufficient evidence to you, but you clearly are apprehensive to share it with the world as if it's not going to be
false.
Sufficient for anybody else. It would be sufficient for somebody else?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Okay. If you want to know, let me just, it's really hard to use Bible Gateway. So 28, let me find if I can find it here.
I've asked.
So 28, 24. Okay, you guys ready?
28, 24. I'm ready.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, for he looketh to the ends of the earth and seeth under the whole heavens, or under the whole heaven, to make the weight for the winds. Pause for a second. Who, like, the fact that weight, what determines the weight of air? High pressure, low pressure, right? Heat. The sun contributes to the weight of air, correct? The fact that go ahead, Beamsy, is that you?
Yes.
Sounds like you. Go ahead.
It's fluid dynamics that actually distributes the weight of the air. It's got nothing to do with the air temperature.
Okay. So the fact, would you agree with me that light contributes, like the light from the sun contributes to the wind?
No.
Where does it mention?
You would not agree with me that weight contributes to wind. Come on.
Do you
where does it
understand
mention
fluid
the light
dynamics?
of? Hang on, guys. Where does it mention the light of the sun there? God understandeth the way thereof, and knoweth the place thereof, for he looketh to the ends of the earth, and seeth under the whole heaven, to make the weight for the winds, and he weigheth the waters by measure. That says that God does that, not the sun. So where is the sun?
Look, Mark, I love your mode of logic, and I follow the same mode, and I can't pull the scripture right off, but I love your mode because that's the way that I operate, and it's there. Because I know that I wouldn't have missed that. I don't have it, but it's there.
I can't.
It's there somewhere.
I mean,
but my point is if you would let me entertain the idea, the fact that the weight of air influences wind. I know it's a simple thing, right? But it's the hundreds of these examples that emphasize my belief in the Bible, besides a lot of other things. But it's not rooted in conjecture.
I've just put it in private chat. It's the King James version. Is that okay to use, or are you working on another
I use
version?
the King James. I also I prefer to go to as far as I can tell the original Hebrew.
Well, to me, that clearly says that God makes the weight for the winds, and he weigheth the waters by measure.
Sure. So, and I've given you guys, and Beamsy was there too, and you guys don't I've given you examples in the Bible when it comes to a bunch of scientific people in the past would argue with each other about how many stars are in the sky. Right, 1,312, or no, it's 1,315, and it's documented throughout time because that's how many we can see with our eyeballs. And yet, the Bible clearly defines it as being much more than that. And you won't see anything in the scientific textbook. Once we discover the microscope, the telescope.
I believe
no
the
one
Bible
gives God
says,
credit.
I believe the Bible says they're unable to be counted.
Right. And it's just we should give God credit when he says things like, that light Sunlight contributes to.
There's a finite amount of stars in the universe. I mean, we will be able to count them at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the number of galaxies is 23, if I remember correctly, 23 and 22 zeros, whatever that number is.
Yeah.
Well,
That's the number of galaxies. So however many suns there are in that many galaxies
is a huge number.
It's a huge number.
Sure.
That's only within the
My
visible
point
universe.
is that you guys
And that's within the visible universe. Well, that's actually a calculation. That's an estimation with the areas that we've physically observed and speculate the size of. So it is a theoretical number.
And you guys sound really smart together, but it doesn't change the fact that way back when a bunch of the smart people with fancy degrees were arguing with each other about how many number of stars were in the sky, because they didn't have the telescope yet, right? They were arguing with each other. Okay, it turns out that the Bible was right. And just accept that. It's okay. It's not. I
think it's selective. I think it's selective to say that the Bible was right. You are picking the wins and forgetting some of the Bible losses.
Can't you just give us a win? Okay, it's okay to just give us a win.
Okay. All right. If I give an answer though, PTown, if I give an answer that's right, or there's somebody that says I know it's true because of X. Well, really, that's not true. It's really just an observance that, maybe history repeated itself and somebody wrote it down and it contributed to human knowledge at one time. But the expiration date has long passed.
Look, a bunch of
people. I just want to say what I want to say in here. Just 1 second quickly. There are two explanations to saying that the stars are uncountable. One explanation is saying that they knew that there was tons of stars and it was such a large number, they thought it would be uncountable. The other is maybe they didn't count up to 1,300 and something and just said, oh, it's uncountable and left it. That's the other explanation that you don't want to consider because your confirmation bias says, well, it has to be scientific knowledge.
Hmm. I ask you this, PTown. You've presented some interesting information, or at least perspectives.
Definitely.
I will commend you on one thing, before I insult you on the other. Is you obviously have a viewpoint of having been a non-believer, and you have a viewpoint of being a believer, and you're pretty firm in that belief. And you definitely know Job. I don't know about the New Testament, which is what makes you a Christian. But to me, I have been studying the Bible for a long time, wanted to be a Christian until I basically had a vision, which then turned me into an atheist. Now, why is that? It's very simple. I think the Bible, after my vision, is some variation of a con job. It's written by men. There's no God who's giving you direct instruction like in Genesis 2 to Adam. So, what will convince me? A conversation directly with God, just like Adam in Genesis 2. Now, if there's something like that for you, that you've gotten a concrete, this came from God, and God gave it to you, I'd like to see it.
Okay. First, help me find my missing bottle of wine my wife hid from me. Okay.
I'm sipping on a little black bourbon.
To answer your question, look, every time people tell me to give them like my one example. Okay, it doesn't work that way. Okay. There's just a lot of little things that make you eventually realize, hello, God made this. He made this book and he made this world. To answer your question, no, I don't, because it's something that I only know myself saying. But to answer your question, Tux, there is a spiritual war going on, and I didn't like admitting it until after I got to see it. But there is a spiritual war going on. There is an enemy who's going to pull you the other direction, and he's going to confuse you into thinking that the Bible's the enemy. And I can't explain it even to the man of me now. It sounds crazy.
PTown.
It sounds silly.
No,
I get it, but that you have to see, you have to observe it first. It's the truth.
Yeah, I don't observe anything.
No,
I know how silly it sounds. Trust me.
You know why it sounds silly is because no one has ever given me an alibi that the deceiver, that's the Hasatan in your book of Job, didn't write one single word of this book. If that is confusing by the war and the enemy, I would love to see that alibi. I would love to see that a deceiver who starts off in God's controlled environment doesn't write one single word of this book. I would like to see that. Otherwise, I think the whole thing is a con job by humans to control humans. And the Bible says so as much right there, smack dab, right in the middle of the beginning, Genesis 1 through 11. It's that simple. It's not a war of anything except I see, after a vision, my mind got expanded. And I see things that are subtext. And Job is a perfect example of how much subtext there can be in a document. I think it was a purposeful thing to do. And you've obviously read it into it that there's science into it as the subtext.
Well,
right?
You've already assumed that there's not, when there clearly is.
Well, I don't
there's not what? That there's not deception, that there's no or there's not science.
There's no science.
So under the assumption,
I think there's casual observance.
If you all look at it with an objective mind, you come to the same conclusion. Why? Because we do share the similar process of understanding things.
There is stuff in there that you could consider science in a way, but it's sort of things that they would know at the time, like sort of separating the ill from their camp and things like that. There's stuff in there that would be understood by the people at that time, and we can all sort of agree, hey, they would know about that. And sort of burying the waste far away from your camp and things like that. That's scientifically, but it doesn't say, hey, that's because of germs. It just, that's what they, they
there's so much observe. There's so much more into it, guys. There's so much more. Well, I just wish I had my...
I understand that you're getting these things out of it, but I read that and I don't see scientific explanations for anything, mate. I'm sorry, I just don't. But
if you studied it, you would, though, Mark. If you looked at it from an objective point of view.
I have looked at it from an objective point of view.
Okay. What does it say about and this is just me trying to be fair here because I don't know that much about it, but because I don't really care.
So just before you get into that, I'll just explain one thing. The reason why people ask for the best explanation all the time, and I know that might irritate you, and it's sort of like, well, what's the best thing you got kind of thing. That's not it at all. It's just that when you're looking at evidence, a whole bunch of bad evidence doesn't make good evidence. Right, the whole idea of it shouldn't be, hey, a whole bunch of circumstantial stuff makes rock solid evidence. That's not how we look at things. The whole point is, well, if that's your best evidence, the rest is going to be worse than that standard. So it's a way to get the very best standard of evidence that you've got without going through all of it. Because I'm really sorry, but we're talking about methodology, and the whole idea of getting a whole bunch of stuff that isn't good and saying, hey, all of it put together makes good evidence is a bad way to find out what's true. But go ahead. I don't want to. I just want to explain why we say that.
To me, okay,
It doesn't matter what it is to you, because what it comes down to is what can you show?
Evident, yeah.
I do think that if we went through it all together, that you guys would have a different perception of it. I do. The assumption that just nitpicking at one thing here and there and saying that's not good enough, it's the ensemble of it all and how it works together that makes it divine. And I do think the Bible is scientific. I don't think that you can deny it if you look at it from an objective perspective. But you can objectively just nitpick at it, like poking at a piece of meat. Yeah,
the problem is, PTown, I feel like you don't mean from an objective perspective. I feel like you mean from your perspective, sort of the perspective that already is taken. And we had a conversation about it earlier, your leap of faith into this, which you sort of explained is what you did. So your sort of timeline shows that you took a leap of faith, then you read it with this new perspective. That's not an objective perspective, mate. I'm sorry. It's your perspective. So it is subjectively the way you are reading it.
Look, maybe so. But now I have this perception that I do look at it from a scientific perspective now that I've come to know the truth.
No, you don't. I am a scientist. That is what I do in most of my time.
Well, let Beamsy, just let PTown finish. Just like, I get you want to sort of say yes, and you are a scientist, but PTown, just finish what you were saying. I think it's really important.
Even though I can't call myself a geologist or a psychologist or, I don't know, any kind of ist. Like, I look at it from that perspective, and I do see the holistic viewpoint of it according to scripture, and it does make sense to me, and I have not found any contradictions of it, and even just that basis of it is quite significant to me, especially considering I did believe, I know Beamsy went to the Antarctic, and I know that he's a geologist, and I know he's dug holes and he's measured the samples, and I would love to see the evidence of it, and I would love to be challenged with it. It would not change the fact that I believe what I believe now, which is this Bible, this book is the true word of God.
Then you're morally bankrupt.
And I would love to see it, Beamsy.
Moral bankruptcy.
He's already made his decision on, I will not change my mind on my point of view. That makes him morally bankrupt and
that's
dishonest.
His decision. I don't think that's a moral. I don't think that has moral implications. I think that you may say he's intellectually bankrupt for not sort of saying he believes in science, and you give him the science and he doesn't. But you could make that argument, but I don't think morality really comes into it at all, Beamsy.
If someone says they believe in science, they follow science, yes, and they have a grounding in science, and then won't accept any scientific evidence, that makes them a liar, and that makes them morally bankrupt.
Well,
because lying.
I just want to clarify, Beamsy, I would love to see what you know, so I can weigh it against my beliefs. Because
watch out on God quest, he'll bombard you. Watch out, like he will give you so much information.
Right, and I love seriously. That. I do. I've always been that type of person, Beamsy. I'm ready for you. It's how I've solidified myself in my belief.
Just remember, PTown, you asked for it. Okay, just remember that when he gives you like pages and pages of information. Sorry to cut you all off. We're just going to invite James Wolfe on here to have a chat with us.
Oh, yay!
And
hey, James, Mr. Wolfe.
Good to see you, sir.
Hey, while we're
thanks for letting me on, Mark.
Hey, James, do you mind me? I'm just gonna let the audience know that I'm gonna try and figure out how to connect a Bluetooth because my phone's gonna die. So do your intro, and I might get cut off here.
I don't know if I've got much of an intro, but yeah, okay, yeah, sure.
Sorry, PTown. You can't generate power through Bluetooth, mate. You might want to look for a power.
I'm gonna plug it in and find another mic here.
Okay. Oh, I gotcha. Sorry, James. Go ahead.
That's all right. I was gonna sort of rush. I was gonna kind of, if I can't, I was gonna rush to the PTown's defense of a sorts. If not, I could just kind of empathize with him or sort of identify where he's coming from to some degree, if I could. I don't know. He sort of because what compelled me to jump on was just the Book of Job, and when I was a Christian, how much that influenced me on a philosophical level. I know that wasn't sort of the angle you were going from. You were looking at more scientifically. But I just wanted to see if PTown was influenced or attracted to the Book of Job, just because of its, if you want to use these terms, philosophical responses to theodicy and karma. That that this idea of a just God, that just a God that is a bit morally brutal towards people, that is indifferent at times, that facilitates bad things happening to good people, this kind of thing. That there is a philosophical response to it, even though it's not a very satisfying one. And then it's basically just, well, God will do as he wishes, and you've got to accept it. And also just dispelling the notion of karma, that this sort of idea that there is a sort of natural justice in the world. That, well, God will do what he wills. There's another passage in the Bible that sort of corresponds or is consistent with it, that says something like, God will show justice to those he will, and mercy to those who he will, kind of thing. And so basically it's trying to say, well, we look at the world and we see a world without a God. And this is why, because it's so intellectually dissatisfying, but it does provide a response of sorts, whether it's, in this story of Job or otherwise. So for me, during my time as a Christian, it was a way of kind of reconciling this view of the world, that seemingly as we look at the world, it's an indifferent, apathetic God, or even a callous and malignant God. That's the way we look at it, but there's really so you got to, I think for me at least, and I don't know where PTown came from, if it was the same thing with PTown, doesn't quite seem like it, but you come with this predisposition or presupposition or assumption that there is a God, and then you try, and then you present, then things like Job present a philosophical argument trying to reconcile what seems to be the relative indifference of the world to a God that's overseeing us, that actually loves us, even though it doesn't seem that way, or that he's even there. The other thing I wanted to... Sorry, Peter, go ahead.
I don't know what I missed, but I love that you brought that up, Wolf.
No,
I might have missed some of your the points you made, but I think I could fill in the blanks, because trust me, that book right there, imagine God and the devil just playing this silly game with humanity, saying, "Hey, check out my guy Job."
Let me summarize. So, and see if this resonates with you at all. Okay, so for me, the Book of Job was a response to the idea of theodicy and a supposedly indifferent God, and that there's a natural system of law and natural system of justice in the world, and then we kind of look at the world and we don't see these things. But Job is kind of a philosophical response to those observations. Does that resonate with you at all?
Well, look, so Wolf, you got to remember that I'm a former atheist.
Well, yeah, okay. I'm not sure what that's got to do with it.
Yeah, I think the Book of Job can be summarized very easily as, who's the worst guy, the bad guy or the bad guy's boss?
Yeah. But
sorry, PTown, are you still there? Just a second, James. Are you still there,
right,
PTown? Or we lost you, mate?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. That's beautiful.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought I was talking.
No worries.
Okay. Trying to charge my phone at the same time with my new Bluetooth. So where was I at? I agree with you. There's a lot of challenging things about Job. When I approached it with my wife, remember, she was sick, and everyone goes for some reason to Job. They're dealing with grief or persecution, as far as they can realize. And I went to it. I discovered science in the Bible. I never saw that, guys. I never did. I approached Christianity as, I'm just going to follow, the sawdust trail, and I'm just going to go to the stand. I'm going to say, yes, Jesus, and see what goody two-shoe trails I'm going to follow. No, and then I realized, oh, this book is actually scientific. I loved that. It was a stepstone. When it
You've
comes
made the
to
claim that the book is scientific multiple
let him
times.
finish, Beamsy.
but
okay,
not
okay,
one-
let me answer. Let me answer Wolf, Beamsy. Let me finish. Okay, I'm sorry. You're right. Okay. When it comes to the philosophical side of things, it's broken down with I think it says 3 or 4 people that approach him while he's going through this process, and there are, and again, remember, Wolf, I missed a lot of your intro because I was dealing with some.
That's all right. I just rambled for most of it. It was basically a summary. You got the crux of it. So go on.
Yeah, the whole ensemble is very challenging for me, even now. Ultimate, like the whole idea is how do we deal with this idea that God actually permits suffering? He doesn't cause it, but he permits it. He lets the devil have his way, and how do we deal with suffering? How do the righteous? Why do the righteous suffer? And he never answers the question, but he definitely in the end declares that he's God. And I don't really understand the whole philosophical benefit of it. There's a few little tricks of the trade that I learned. One thing that no one mentions when you read the books, because I got a few books written on the Book of Job, and I don't like them, to be honest with you. Just a bunch of like smart people throughout time just writing about what other smart people said. I don't care. Like, but one of the things was the first thing that Job does was he prays. He prays for other people. He gets on his knees. And I don't know what that means. Something I noticed that the other guy.
Okay, Beamsy, you had something to say about the scientific claims in Job.
PTown, you keep making the claim that there is scientific evidence within Job. I've asked for one, and you have never presented one, ever. Are you going to support
Here's an
your
example
claim,
of how
or
you
am
keep
I-
saying the one.
PTown, can you just let Beamsy finish? I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm not saying one, I'm saying a. You keep saying that it is scientific, but then you don't show anything scientific. You show interpretive or possibly misinformed. You don't show anything that can be shown to be scientific.
So I guess Beamsy's asking for something objectively scientific.
Okay, there's one verse here. I mean, there's a lot of them, but I think Job 38.
Referring to creation.
Well, I have a different interpretation than most. I think it's creation and then the flood. There's
Which part exactly? Is it the foundations thereof fastened?
yeah. So when I started studying this, I have a different perspective than most. But if you go to Job 38, God starts to talk right there.
Well, I guess the problem here is if you have a different perspective than most, isn't this just subjective interpretation?
No, he wants one example, which is really hard. But if you go to Job 38:16.
38:16.
Yeah. Okay, and again, he can break this down. He can, like Beamsy could just, but as a geologist, maybe he would appreciate it. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Mark.
So 16 is, hast thou entered the springs of the sea, or hast thou walked in search of the depth?
So if we go into the deepest part of the sea, as far as we can observe, we discover that there's springs of the sea. A lot of that conjecture has been used to perpetuate, which I would consider now blasphemy, perpetuate the theory that life evolved there. But it doesn't change the fact that God said there's springs in the sea. I know it's small, it's no proof, but it is scientific. He had a theory. It was put in the Bible, in the oldest story in the book. And it's what it is, man. You can't deny it. See?
Other than the fact being that a spring is an aspect of fresh water, and there are no springs of fresh water at the bottom of the sea.
Would you want to hold your doctorate against that?
Yes.
Can I play devil's advocate for a moment?
Sure.
Of course.
Well, and I don't mean to straw man you here at all, PTown. That's not my intention, but it got me curious about, because I'd never really looked into, supposed scientific consistencies within Job. So it got me curious, and I was just reading here, and I'll just recite a little bit of text here. A reading of the statements of Job, Elihu, and God himself are filled with scientific description. We reiterate as stated in past, scripture. Okay, sorry. We'll go to Job 36, 27 and 28. He draws up the drops of the water, which distill as rain to the streams. Clouds pour down their moisture, and abundant showers fall on mankind. While Elihu does not possess terms for evaporation and condensation in his ancient language, is clearly understood water traveled in vapor, formed from Earth's surface to the clouds, later to distill to liquid rainwater and become abundant showers.
Hold on a second. You have, James, I don't mean to cut you off, but
no, it's okay.
I use the King James, so you said Job 35.
Yeah, Job
36.
36 to 27 to 28.
36, okay, 27, 28. Okay.
Yeah, I use King James too. This is just an excerpt.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's okay. 27, 28. Yeah, so, I love that you bring this up. Okay, so you have to go to the Hebrew to really grasp the full concept of this and how scientific it really is. So it says and I'll try and do it in the English. Okay. For he maketh small the drops of water, they pour down rain according to the vapor thereof. Okay, so the vapor, that which goeth up. Okay, and that's what determines how much water falls down. Okay, from the basic English, which the clouds do drop and distill upon man abundantly. I think I already covered that. Also, can any understand the spreadings of the clouds with the noise of his tabernacle? Behold,
Yes, we
spreadeth
can.
his light upon it, and covereth the bottom of the sea. So what's your point? Am I missing something here?
No, there's no point. I was just basically saying this may be some of what the scientific claims of the consistency within the Bible. This could be one of them. This is one.
Right? Yeah. No, you have to connect it with another part, though. There's another very scientific part where, I like where you're going, and this is kind of the mode of logic that I use.
So PTown, I don't see that like it. They could observe rain, obviously, and they could observe water vapor, obviously. There's nothing in this which points to a scientific explanation.
There is though
evaporation and condensation.
There is though. That's what I'm trying to say is like even that is in here. Okay. And I'll try and find it. Okay, remember I'm doing this just.
There is nothing in here which scientifically explains. There isn't, PTown. This is your knowledge of condensation and evaporation, and going. Well, I'm going to find something in the Bible when all they've mentioned is rain, which they could observe, and water vapor, which they could observe. There's nothing that sort of says, "Hey, the water evaporates under heat and light of the sun, then is taken up as a vapor. The cold makes it condensate, and that causes rain." There is nothing in here that says that. It is your subjective interpretation.
There is, though. It's your naive ability to research that, though. There's nothing that I'm going to say because you're going to object to every word that I say. But if you, Mark, because you're a smart man and a logical man, and Beamsy too, you're partly smart and logical. That's a joke, Beamsy. Mark, if you went and looked at this, you guys would see the truth. Okay.
If I like PTown, let me get this straight. If I took a leap of faith beforehand and believed God to be true, and then went and looked at this, then I would believe that this would be a representation of science. But I would be using confirmation bias. My previous bias
False,
of having taken
false,
that
Mark.
leap of
Before you
faith
go off,
would influence me. No, because I know this has happened in the things that I have seen, and it happens in every religion.
you
Like
are
I
using
said,
confirmation bias on your end, is what I'm saying, and you're going to go off
no,
into the.
I'm not.
You are though, and here let me because you brought it up directly. Give me a chance, okay, and then you guys
Okay.
can tag team me, if that's okay. And I don't have the original Hebrew, but if you go to Job 37:10, actually it's not that far from where we're at. Okay, by the breath of God frost is given, and the breath of the waters is straightened. Also by watering he weareth the thick ground. He scattereth his bright cloud. Okay, it's simple. By the breath of God frost is given. By the breath of God means wind, okay, in some way, shape, or form, contributes to frost, okay? And the breadth of the waters, plural, waters, not just water, waters is straight. And if you think about an ice molecule here,
Do you think
and remember,
frost,
we're governed,
do you
like
think
we're talking about
frost is
Hebrew here. We're in English. It's not going to be to the full scientific
okay?
extent that we want to dive into. But if we're talking about, have you seen the documentary out there where there's an ice crystal comes down, just a snowflake, and they talk about how if you take that snowflake to a microscope, and you'll notice that there's like an object at the center of it because it needs something to bond to. That's also in the Book of Job, as far as I can tell.
What?
Can I
Okay,
jump in with
so
that?
hang on, just I want
Yeah,
to
you're
address
right.
this because frost isn't formed by wind. It's formed by low temperature and moisture in the air. That's what forms frost, not wind. That's
Okay,
not scientific in the slightest.
let me make sense of it, because there's a lot of connections that I'm not equipped to answer right now. But I'm going to try, even though I'm making myself look like a fool. If you go out there, and I read like an old book from the 1910s, but if you go out there and you observe frost on ground, okay, it does require something to bond to in order to create frost.
No, not really, not always.
You would presume, right? I can't remember.
Okay, so there's depositional frost or hoarfrost, and there is Hold on, let me look it up. There's another type of frost.
I think that, and this is where it goes back, and I just don't want to trick you later on. That's why I want to bring it up now. If you go back 4 verses, and this is where I think a lot of people who nitpick at the Bible go wrong. Just go back 4 verses here. It's talking about the frost in the air, which we would call clouds.
Yeah, which would be depositional frost. So frost has two.
So we would
ways
agree.
to form.
No.
Pause. Let me finish. PTown.
No, pause. This is important. Mark, bear with me, and I won't hurt you.
PTown. No.
This is important. If it's okay.
Well, there's 2 types of frost. There's depositional frost, and then there's frost caused by freezing objects.
I'm talking about the frost of the Bible here. Okay, it's 4 verses
scientific.
before.
The wind doesn't cause it, P-Town. The wind does not cause frost. It is low temperature and moisture in the air. That is what causes frost.
But it does require movement in the air to contribute to it. So if you have
No, it doesn't.
belief, it has to be movement for a lot of things to happen.
You can create frost in a sealed container with low temperature and moisture. That's all it requires, P-Town. You do not need wind.
And this is why I didn't mean to cut you off and be upsetting, but this is the logic I came about, like, to my beliefs. Okay, so if you go back just 4 verses, talking about the frost of the air,
so that would be
not
verse
the frost
6
on the ground, which would require movement.
Okay, just give me 1 sec. I'm going to bring in Simos, who is waiting very patiently. Hello, Simos.
Hello. Just carry on. I don't want to interrupt. So
okay.
Carry on.
So 4 earlier is, for he saith to the snow, Be thou on the earth, likewise to the small rain and to the great rain of his strength. That says nothing, really.
It just presents context, possibly.
Well, it says nothing. It just says that God says, he saith to the snow, be thou on the earth. I'm not sure that's the scientific explanation that you're looking for, but
well, no, it is, though. If you look at it from my perspective, it's pretty clear he's still talking about the context of what's being created in the air.
As I said, if I took a leap of faith and believed everything beforehand and then read it, I'm sure I would see your perspective, but I wouldn't be objective, and I wouldn't be that is not something I'm prepared to do, because when you take leaps of faith and you believe things before you read the stuff about them, you do use confirmation bias. That's how it occurs.
There's a lot of scientific discoveries throughout time, Mark, where they weren't studying something that they thought they would come to realize. For me, I didn't expect this to happen. And there's no way, shape, or form am I going to convince you right now that this is something to be studied. But if you approached it with the same methodology that you perpetuate, you would come to see that there is something here, and God said it.
I do,
Peter, and that is scientific.
I do, and none of that is science, mate. I'm sorry, but it just isn't. I'm really sorry.
It doesn't change what was written. And it is what it is, baby.
Well, it is what it is, but it's not scientific. And if you want to believe it, that's fine. Like, you can believe it, but we've got scientists in here. We've got people that do science, are aware of science, and I'm really sorry, mate, but sort of reading that into it is not scientific. It just isn't.
This kind of and the reason I came in was because confirmation bias was mentioned, and I'm a big fan. But I would say
you're
one
a
of the
fan
things,
of doing it, or a fan of fighting
I'm a
it?
fan of saying everybody has confirmation bias. I mean, you can't be human without it. But one of the ways we determine whether we're suffering from confirmation bias, when I say suffering, I mean believing something which may not be the case, is of course through methodology, repeated methodology. And I think that's what's important here, is to point out that you yourself, PTown, admitted, if I may just have a few moments to speak, you yourself admitted that you met your girlfriend, you had interesting conversations, and then you proclaimed faith, and then you found out the faith was justified through reasoning. Is that roughly your position, PTown?
My wife would definitely not agree with you.
Okay,
I was very challenging to her. No, there was definitely a separation. I mean, even though I love my wife and she was good at answering my questions, when it comes to believing in the Bible and seeing the divinity in it, I was very scientific in my approach.
Right, I'm with you.
You can talk to Mrs. PTown.
When it came to the Bible, you did what? You disagreed with her on what the meaning of the Bible was.
I did. I approached it without even knowing anything, really. Like, it didn't really matter to me what the Bible said, because I just assumed, like a lot of you right now, just assume that it's just a bunch of fairy tales and a bunch of mumbo jumbo. That's how I approached it, even though I considered the thought that,
right.
Right. But it was still, that's how deeply.
So how did this conversation with your girlfriend go then? Because, well, you said girlfriend earlier, so presumably you weren't married at the time.
No, it happened after we got married.
You what? Sorry, you converted after you got married.
I was converted before we got married, but
well, there we are.
When but I was.
Would fiance be more accurate?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to explain. I mean, and maybe you guys could appreciate it, since I approached it the same. way that you would, right? Coming from this perspective.
Sure.
It takes time.
Okay, just
Right.
letting you all know, I'm going to be wrapping up in about 15 minutes or so. If you want to maybe do outros or something, I could leave a little bit of time for that as well, if you would like.
Okay, I mean, if I got the story incorrect, then there's no point in starting down a new line of inquiry, right? So I thought you said, your girlfriend at the time, you were an atheist. You met this girl. She was a Christian, presumably. You had interesting conversations. She challenged you and stimulated you intellectually, and then you later read the Bible and realized that this was in fact the Word of God, and became a Christian. I'm sorry if that's an incorrect interpretation of what you said.
I think that I challenged her more than she challenged me. Honestly.
Right. So
But yeah.
she became an atheist. Is that what you're saying?
Oh no.
Of course not, Simon.
Well, let's just say this then, right? So she challenged you if you changed to her point of view, not the other way around.
I think that's fair to say. Yeah.
I mean, if we're going to use logic, let's stick with it.
Well, so there was a girl before her, and I realized I gotta come on softly because the first one didn't go so well.
Yeah, of course not.
So it was a learning experience. I gotta.
Yeah. We have
but
a
it
thing
was
in
still
the
enough.
atheist
Trust me.
community
We went through.
called the Pine Creek theorem.
We went through this period
you are
of
definitely a contender.
What's the Pine Creek theorem?
The thing that converts most guys to Christianity is not the Holy Spirit; it's women.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, is this an official thing, or is it just something that he said?
Well, you know Doug, do you? Do you know Doug?
No, I don't. I've never.
Oh,
never
okay.
met
Well,
him,
Doug
never
is
talked to
Pine
him.
Creek.
Yeah, I've heard of him, but I've never really.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy, and he has this theorem that it's women that really convert men to Christianity.
Oh, okay.
Atheists. I think personally he's got a point, but it might not just be women. I think children and middle age also do it.
Yeah, I think. Yeah. The Bible doesn't convert a lot of people. I don't know. I think that may be true for some people, Simos, but whether it's the majority, I have no idea. I've got no clue.
No, I agree.
Well, I think I might wrap up here. No, thank you so much, James Wolfe. You're awesome, mate. Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. And I'd like to thank Beamsy and Tux and Simos and James Wolfe, of course. But if there's anybody, Beamsy, do you want something to sort of say going out?
The two things that you'll learn whenever you go into an institute of learning is how little you know. It's one of the biggest shocks that you have to overcome. You see quite arrogant people walk in thinking that they know so much until they suddenly realize the sheer amount of information that is out there. And it is a very humbling experience. And people who go through it are changed for life because they realize there is a better way of looking at the world, and there is just so much more that they need to learn to understand the world. And to avoid confirmation bias within the system, that's why people repeat the same experiment again and again and again with different people in different environments to see that if they get the same result.
Yeah, rigorous methodology. Well, I'm just saying that was the point I came in to really discuss, was this point about confirmation bias and how you can mitigate it to some degree, and a large degree in the case of academic science, of course, as Beamsy just pointed out, is by having a methodology which you follow and other people follow, and then you compare results, and then you can take out at least your subjective opinion on what the data is, maybe not the results of the data, but to a large degree what the data is. And then you can compare and contrast with other people to find out whether you agree or disagree. And that shows you if you've just in rapid disagreement with other people, that it's likely to be confirmation bias. And that's, of course, the case we see with religion. There are many religions in the world, and they all disagree with each other. And that tells you that religion is based on confirmation bias more than it's based on any kind of rigorous methodology. You know the word
methodology.
I'm looking for.
Yeah,
Thank you,
I
methodology.
Yeah.
So that's all. That was the point I wanted to say, because you know, he pushed back and said, "Oh no, you're using confirmation bias," and yeah, I think that's true. I think atheists use confirmation bias. I think Christians use confirmation bias. And the difference here is when we're talking about science, is there is a method which gets around that problem. There isn't such a system in religious discourse.
Mostly, yeah.
Mostly, yeah.
Thank you so much, Beamsy and Summers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to throw you guys backstage. This was sort of an interview with PTown, so I do want him to have the last word and sort of, you know, take up the sort of second fiddle. But thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I do apologize. It's like getting on.
That's 4 okay. It's been a long one. I've enjoyed the conversation between you and PTown.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I want to say thank you to him as well for being, you know, very open and honest with his conversation, and that's always refreshing. So thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm just going to shove you to backstage. Sorry, PTown. I do want you to have the last word, mate, because you are my guest on the show, and I want to thank you so much for coming on and talking with me. And you know, we may not agree in everything, but I think I've got a tremendous amount of respect for you. You know, sort of coming on and talking with atheists and giving your perspective, and I really do appreciate it, mate. So thank you very much, and I'd love to do it again sometime if you're open to that. I really would. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, Mark, you know, I messaged you earlier. Honestly, if it was just you and me, I would have done it, because I do really appreciate talking to you. I think that our backgrounds are very similar in this when it comes to the way that God made us with our brains. Like, we're going to question everything, and we're going to follow where the evidence leads us. And when it comes to what Seema said, confirmation bias, I do agree that it's on both sides. Trust me. When it comes to spending the weekend with my in-laws now, I definitely see it. And look, I know how crazy it sounds when I say that, you know, I love the Bible as a former atheist, someone who loves science. Even now, I believe it to be the truth, and I love discussing it. And Mark, the fact that I can really only find it in another atheist on the other side of the planet baffles me, because ultimately you and I do share some common beliefs that this is the most important topic that we can.
Oh, sure, yeah. I share a lot of beliefs with Christians, a lot of similarities. You know, I will agree with that. Absolutely, Peter. Sorry, mate, I didn't want to interrupt you. Sorry.
No, you know, and I was just saying that we have some common beliefs, and I get it. I wish I could give you an instant answer on everything. I do this for a hobby, you know, on the weekends sometimes, and you know, I like to have more wine than the Bible probably would say I should. But I do love you guys, and that includes all of you in the chat that might, you know, challenge what I think. But I do honestly try to approach things with a logical mind, with the same process that I had before. And it's hard for me to answer some questions sometimes, because I do believe that I've come to know the truth, and I would love to share that with you all. And I would love to, but unfortunately, God made it in a way that it's not just a 2 + 3 + no, actually it might be just as simple as that: 2 + 3 + 7 + 9 + 15 + 3 + 4, and then you'll see it. But it takes some work. It's definitely not just a pointing out one piece of scripture and just tearing it to pieces. You know,
well, I don't think it's that easy, because everybody that does that will come up with the same answer, and I think that's, yeah. But yeah, sorry, PTown. I just thought I'd point that out, that maths kind of gives us one answer that nobody disagrees on, whereas, you know, religion or the Bible may not do that.
But I do appreciate you, Mark. You have a debate coming up with Kent Hovind.
I do,
I wish I could say I'm rooting for you. I'm not rooting for anyone. I'm just rooting
it's
for
fine.
more
Root
people.
Against me, that's fine. I don't mind. That's cool.
I'm just rooting that more people, and all the people in your chat should just share this, because we all do share the same belief that this is an important topic. And
Sure.
Why it's not the most important topic in the world, I have no idea why. And maybe you might share that belief. I think that.
Yeah, I think that it's very important. I'm not sure about the most important topic in the world. I think maybe existential things like nuclear war and sort of things that kill people, outright. Not I think that that's maybe more important, but very important. Absolutely, PTown. I do agree, mate.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we could imagine some other more important things. Hopefully those things don't happen, but where we came from, where we're going, even if you're an atheist out there and you're part of an atheist stream, it just shows that, to me, that there is an interest in this topic, and I want to be a weapon, or just a fence post, whatever analogy you want to use. I want it to be for what I believe in now, and I want the world to know, and your folks to know, that I believe in the Bible, and there's a good reason for it.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you so much, PTown. I really do appreciate you coming on, mate. And hopefully I'll get the time to line these up, because really I am a amateur as well. I do this for a hobby as well. So please don't take me too seriously. I am not a professional, and many people in the atheist community will tell you that outright. So I really do appreciate you though. And chat, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for hanging around. I do have as PTown mentioned, I do have a debate with Kent Hovind coming up. It's quite huge. I think you'll probably need PTown support. I think I'm fine, obviously, which everybody always thinks they're fine. So yeah, no worries at all. But I'm looking forward to it. And thanks for hanging around with us. And I will catch you on the next interview or debate, or my next foray into Christian rooms. And hopefully I can see you again.